Hello, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be around the world. I am Jay Campbell, and you are watching the quote-unquote Jay Campbell and Jason Breshears of Archaix podcast. And I'm very excited today to have Jason in studio. We got about 75 people watching live from the very beginning, which is awesome. So far, the AI is not tripping this. So to all of you guys out there, blessed, humbled, honored, privileged to have you here. I am humbled, honored, and privileged to have Jason here. I mean, Jason, as I just said to him, is a living thesaurus of information, and all of us are blessed to have him here. I promise you that this podcast is going 3 hours, as long as Jason's brain continues to spin. I have a lot of questions. These are good questions. Most of these questions are collated from you guys, the watcher, the audience, the listeners. I told Jason before we went live that like most of these questions are coming from his friends and his biggest fans that I don't know personally, but I've chopped them up and I've put them in a fashion that I think is perfectly, replicable for Jason to start big picture and then, go back to how far he's, declined history, again, through the books that have been suppressed and that he's able to read. And then we'll come up to the modern times of like what's going on. And for those of you guys who don't know me, who are new to me, I'm all about consciousness. I'm all about creating your heaven on earth, which I know Jason is too, with his two separate timelines with the simulacrum and then, of course, the personal reality. So we are going to offer solutions at the end of this show. This is not going to be doom and gloom. This is not, if you're into fear porn and scrolling, leave. This is not the show for you. Again, Jason has decoded all of this and this information. More people must become aware of this. So Jason, with all that said, and let me just say for all of you guys in the chat, if you have a question, wait. Don't put it in right now, that I have to go and, Jason and I have to scroll back up and read it. Just wait. Let us get about 90 minutes into this and then feel free to start asking your questions. I get it if you're like, no, Jay, I'm listening and I had to post it because I'll forget. But just don't expect us to answer the question until the end of the show. So I'm leaving that there. Okay, so with all that said, Jason, again, honored to have you. Maybe before you summarize, give us an update about you personally right now in your life. How can the listening audience help you beyond what they're currently doing?
Well, I have a really good audience. But first, before I begin, how is my audio?
You're good to me.
Okay, excellent. I'll see in the chat here, somebody's going to say something about my audio here in a minute. They always do.
You sound good, man. Your voice is so powerfully, authoritative. I would tell you if I felt like it was low, but you sound good.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment.
Oh, it's a compliment.
Well, somebody says a little low. Yeah, audio's good. Okay. Well, one, I have to begin by saying I'm not dissimilar from any of you. I have the same questions. I have the same curiosities. I have the same exact, basically suspicions that this neatly packaged deal that we call history isn't all that we suspect it to be. I mean, that we have been told it is. Like I said, I'm no different than anybody else. So I initially began my journey many years ago trying to prove the very things that I was taught as a child. I wanted to go far beyond what my church had told me, and I wanted to use secular information and ancient translations to verify that the stories the church told me were indeed real. Unfortunately, after 20-something years of basically data mining these old records, I found the opposite to be true. And not just any records. I went to the original sources. I read the translations of the Archaix tablets. I have read the translations of the English translations from the German and the French manuscripts of the Ugaritic text, the text from Rashamra. I have read the Archaix epos, the epic, probably 4 different translations in English of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it's very important to read multiple translations because a hardcore conservative like Samuel Noah Kramer is not going to translate all those ideograms exactly like a more liberal Maureen Gallery Kovacs. there are fundamental differences that can be detected. So I'm very, very thorough in my analysis of the things that I ingest. What I accept as data has to go through many filters. I probably employ more filters than actual true accredited historians do. I hold myself up to a very, very high standard. So my curiosities led me into these texts, and these texts led me into other epics. I wanted to find common denominators. I wanted to find commonalities that would show me that there is a thread of information here to be found, and not just a bunch of random facts that we piece together and call stories and traditions. So these led me into the writings of Saint Cunayathan. I had to read Diodorus Siculus and Strabo. I had to piece together fragments of history from Homer. Homer gives us some very fascinating information, but we have to put it into context. Homer's Iliad and Homer's Odyssey are often basically, they're basically paraded today as being Greek epics of tradition and all the Greek stories of myth, but they go back to historical common denominators. The problem is, when Homer, Theognis, and Hesiod, the three great epic writers of the 8th century BC, when they arrived on the scene, basically all at the same time, their culture, the entire Mediterranean world, had just emerged from a 300-year dark age. So they wrote in the frames of reference that they were familiar with. Everything was giants and titans and supernatural phenomena and krakens and medusae and all that. But when you break down these when you break down the common denominators that are found through the threads of all these texts, you find parallels. And then you find in the Greek writings, okay, well, this is very interesting because they're basically, when you strip away the cultural attachments, they're basically saying the same thing you find in the wars of the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Puranic commentaries. And you find, and you go even, and you chase the source materials even further back, and you find out the Hindus basically weren't the originators of these texts. They had basically added their own cultural distinctions to more ancient Sanskrit and Vedic text. Then you learn about the Atharva Veda and the Rig Veda, and you find out, wow, the further I go back in time, the more precise and definitive the texts and messages that are conveyed. The farther we take some of these ancient texts, the less mythological they begin sounding. Almost as if we went through a very long 2,000-year period of devolving, not evolving. The exact opposite of the uniformitarian model is what we find to be true. So then we find in the traditions, we find flying vehicles and I mean, only 2,000 years later did these turn into great rocks, birds. They were turned into flying carpets. They were turned into genies trapped in a bottle, some conveyance, flaming chariots that crossed the sky with unusual winged horses. These type of attachments are mythological, but they're from the frames of reference to a people who didn't understand that they were actually conveying technological pieces of information. So this is why when you find, when I'm reading archaeology books and I see that, oh, okay, there's a great mystery here, because apparently the Egyptologists started breaking the plaster off of the ancient temple of Abydos in Egypt, which had been found underwater, under the sands of the desert. They started breaking the plaster off that was put there by a pharaoh. Then they quit after it was photographed because it was showing technologically advanced machinery. It was showing tools, machinery, weaponry, and all kinds of very advanced concepts that should have never been seen on an ancient Egyptian wall. The pharaohs didn't understand these either, so they covered them up in plaster, and on the plaster were Egyptian hieroglyphics. But that's not what we find beneath the plaster. So when I find things like this, then I understand. Okay, when we find actual technolithic artifacts, that the tolerances, for those of you who don't understand, when it comes to stonework, tolerance is very important, because when it comes to dealing with stone, it is very, very difficult to get a surface area. The larger the surface area in square footage, the less tolerance it's going to have, because it's almost impossible to keep it perfectly level unless you're dealing with things like laser lathes. And the technolithic architecture that we have found in several places around the world, like Pumapunka outside Lake, it's Pumapunka outside Lake Titicaca, and the pyramid Lucarmata. These are inexplicable. They match the absolute precision found at Abydos, the Sphinx Temple, and the Valley Temple. And for those of you who don't know, those temple complexes are relatively new discoveries. They were found up until the days of Napoleon. The pyramids were 1/3 the way buried in the desert. The Sphinx was buried all the way up to its neck. I said most of Egypt wasn't even excavated, all these ruins, until the last 300 years. So they were so perfectly preserved because they had basically been the ancient fossilized seabed of an extension of the Mediterranean that is no longer there. This is why for centuries, the 3 holy mountains or the 2 holy mountain motive was always associated as being surrounded by water, because it was. After the collapse of the vapor canopy, the Great Flood, people had to travel to the Great Pyramid by boat. It's the only way to get to them because they were half submerged in water. The third pyramid could not be seen, but it was known it was down there. So when I find references to this in texts all around the world, and I listen to these biblical pastors that some of them knew what they were talking about, they were breaking down the geometrical value of words in Hebrew and Aramaic in the Old Testament and showing, look, these passages concern the Great Pyramid. Isaiah chapter 19 is all about the Great Pyramid. It describes what its function is, why it's there. It's a witness. It's a testimony. It was put in the land of Egypt to be a testimony unto God for mankind. In addition to that, it's also at the border of Egypt. Well, both of these cannot be true. So there must be something else we have to understand here, because the passage on the Great Pyramid in the book of Isaiah is about it's in the midst of the land of Egypt, and yet it's at the border thereof. This is in the Bible concerning the Great Pyramid. What's interesting is it is in the land of Egypt, but the Great Pyramid is situated exactly at the head of the delta in the ancient times, it was called the 9 Bows. It's where the Egyptian Nile River separates into 9 little sub-rivers, spiders out into a triangle. It's a 108-mile-long marsh. That is the border of Egypt, but it's actually the center of Lower Egypt, where all the pyramids are. And for
that was the Fertile Crescent. That was the real Fertile Crescent.
And so that was where the Israelites were. Oh, that's where all the Israelite neighborhoods were. It was like a paradise. It was like a Garden of Eden back then. Now, after the collapse of the vapor canopy, that area for about 1,000 years, it took about 1,000 years for it to basically dry out to what we have today. This is why archaeologists, going all the way back to the 1700s, Frederick Norton was a researcher. Very few people ever mention Frederick Norton. Frederick Norton surveyed the Giza complex. He studied, he drew pictures of the pyramids, the Sphinx. He did this in the 1700s. One thing he noticed was there was writings on the masonry, and there were seashells everywhere. You could stick your hand anywhere in. Well, the Egyptian Antiquities Authority has had over 150 years to remove those shells. They've had whole crews doing that. Yeah, they basically combed that whole area of the desert. So, to go back to the original point, nothing that I researched comported with what I was told. So I began an archive system. I began archiving chronologically everything that I was finding. I was still believing in the Bible. But that's how dangerous our programming is. When you take a 5-year-old kid and adopt him, that's what happened to me. I was adopted straight off the streets. You adopt a 5-year-old kid with a malleable mind straight into one of the most puritanical Southern Baptist families in Texas. That's what happened. That's what happened to me.
You were baptized into the Godspell, Jason.
I was. Hey, I read that book, Breaking the Godspell by Neil Freer.
Absolutely. I have it over on my bookshelf, so have I.
Listen, man. Yeah, Neil Freer, he's a phenomenon. I should do a video on him. He's a beast. But for those of you who don't know, Neil Freer is a contemporary philosopher, and he breaks down the philosophical terms and shows you modern concepts that are conveyed in the Bible and how it's all to control the mind. He shows you everything to control the masses. So anyway, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
So I was there. So here I am, 5 years old. I'm adopted straight off the street. I came out of a pretty bad situation, and I'm adopted by basically a Puritan mother.
Right.
And she's in the church ministry, and she really wants to impress the pastor every Sunday. She's involved in everything. I'm in the youth group. I'm in the choir. I'm every Wednesday. I got to help with the church dinner. I have absolutely no social life. I have nothing going for me at school, like kindergarten, nothing. My entire life until I was 15 years old, for 10 years, was Southern Baptist Christianity church. That's what it was. Right. When I was 15 years old, I had enough. I snapped. I packed everything I could fit into a backpack, and I hitchhiked across the United States doing odd jobs for 2 years. Ran into the wrong people, started hanging out with them. By 17 years old, I was in prison. So that's how I got to where I was to do this research. But I did not break free of my programming until I was 40 years old, when I had amassed so much data that I could no longer be honest with myself when I woke up in the morning and I looked at my cup of coffee and my Bible, because it had been ingrained in me since I was a child that no matter how much I rebelled against my mother, every morning in prison, I always spent 15 to 20 minutes in my Bible drinking my coffee before I started my prison day. I didn't stop doing that until I was 40, but that's how powerful that programming is. But
well, so let me add to that. So you and I have very similar origin stories. Of course, we've met via the internet 3 weeks ago. I was 42, and I had to hit rock bottom. Now I ran out. By the way, I'm not Southern Baptist, but Roman Catholic, so same shit, different Abrahamic scam. But, I ran out of the back of church when I was like 6 years old, and my dad chased me out. He's like, "Where are you going?" It's like, "I'm not going to be in that cult." Right. So like, I knew at a very early age that, just as you figured out at 15, that we were being inculcated with bullshit. So, I want to get back to your story here in a second. But Jason, I really believe this. And this is why the Egyptian mystery schools, whatever we can decode from them, did not allow initiates to even attempt to enter until they were 40. Mm-hmm. That's the truth. You do not have, and again, this is not a no offense to younger people watching, because we love you guys and we're grateful that you're watching because you're going to learn, but you don't have enough real world simulacrum experience until you've gone through 3 decades of life. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's true. I have met some very interesting, basically girls and guys in their 30s and late 20s that really impressed me with their maturity and their willingness to learn. But you're absolutely right. And there has been times, Jay, where I actually really wanted to disable comments. I wish there was a filter on YouTube that would allow me to disable comments, not by age, but sure. I have a lot of people that watch 4 or 5 of my live videos and think that they can abbreviate and collate the data in those videos and actually understand my theories and all the information that I put out. But before I ever did podcasts or live videos, I had already released over 200 uploads just to get the information out there first. Right. So, I wouldn't do it even if YouTube had a setting that allowed me to do it. But I have been frustrated to the point where I almost would have done it. It's just disable comment. If there's no way, if you can't verify that you've watched at least 30 videos, you shouldn't even be commenting. Because I agree. 90% of the comments are already answered multiple times in earlier vids. And what frustrates me more than anything, now I have some hardcore listeners, but what frustrates me is you and I know, because we're content creators, YouTube allows us to go look in our analytics. We can see if people are going back to watch those uploads. So when I have 12,000 people in the last week watching a live video from 4 days ago, okay, that's fine. But that tells me there's 8,000 of you that didn't go back and watch the data that video came from a video that was released a year earlier, because that video still has 2,000 views. Right. So I know you didn't go back and look at that and watch that. And that's cool. That's your prerogative. People want to be in the fast lane. They want the information fast. But then they want to ask me questions for which the data has already been provided and answered 100 times in 10 different comment sections. Right. So that does get old. It really does.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. And let me just say for everybody out there, because we have a lot of people, I imagine we're going to have probably a couple hundred people watching live at various points through this, even with the suppression, even with the blackballing and the shadow banning that Jason and I experience. You guys are out there. So again, grateful for all of you. Love and light. There is going to be a time in this podcast when he gets through a little bit more of his cosmology where I am going to ask questions to him that are simple questions for a lot of you guys that he has answered many times before. But as I told him off air, I wanted him to be able to use this, and not just him, but, all of us watching, as a real good basis of like, hey man, like if you're new to Jason, you got to watch the Phoenix for Dummies. You got to watch, All Is Told. I have all of your videos linked in the comments below now. But then I want this one to be a basis too, because again, as you know, I've watched a lot of your videos lately, and a lot of the people that are researching you are doing as good a job as possible, but they're not very organized, and it's all over the place, and it's not fair to you because your brain is so prodigious and you have so much information. So I'm saying this when we get towards the questions. These are going to be organized, folks, from literally Jason's tip of spear knowledge going back 7,000, 6,000, whatever it is, years to up until the present day. So if you're asking questions right now, they're not going to get answered. Leave time. This is a 3-hour live stream, okay, and maybe longer. Jason and I could spit this stuff out all night, all day. But it is very important that Jason, moving forward, and I deal with the same stuff in my life, like, you should not be asking questions that have been answered 100 times before. And Jason, the truth is, and you know this, is that technology has dumbed down people to the point where they're so lazy. They want you as the guru, me as the guru, whoever the guru is, to give them the answer. They don't want to research. They don't want to read. They don't want to watch 5 more seconds, 10 more seconds. They want you to give them the answer. That's where we have gotten to. And you're right. People have a prerogative to do whatever they want, and God bless you. You have free will. Some of you do. But at the end of the day, Jason and I also have a right to say it's not going to happen. I've already answered that. Next question. And so think about that before you ask your question. As Jason said, watch his videos. And by the way, I put the link into my comments too. Jason's, glossary on his website has so much information. If you just spent 90 minutes going through his glossary, you're going to have a lot of your questions answered. So anyway, I'm going to stop pontificating. This is your show. But please, as he said, guys, do your homework. Watch the videos. Go to his channel. You might have to, do a 2-week binge because there's that much amazing content. And as he said in a lot of his shows and continues to say, he's got so much more that he can do. And, he knows this, and, I don't want to humble him, but I have a group of people right now that are like, Jason's going into full-time work. He's not going to be doing his job anymore because we need him doing this stuff. So I'll be talking about that more in the future, but his mind, Jason, what can you do? Another 10 years worth of videos if you did them every day?
I have enough data in my studio to just do this forever, really. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If you were doing 12 hours a day of videos for 10 years, you probably can still come up with original creative content. Okay, so let's get back to you. Okay, so now you're basically in prison. You're reading voraciously. How did you source the material?
Okay, well, first of all, for those who don't know, prisons have a lot of old books floating around them.
Right.
And in Texas, prison administrators don't like to throw away state resources. So when older prisons were basically condemned, they didn't destroy the books. They had prisoners go in, box them all up, and send them to another unit. And then they wouldn't get used because when the new unit opened, the community around that prison donated all new books. So with all the new books on the shelves, the old books get forgotten in boxes. So I did inventory in prison a lot. I was an SSI. That was the job description I had. It was called state support inmate. And I was all that. They pretty much find out what your skills are. Prison administrators will find out what your skill sets are, and then they will capitalize on them. So for me, it was really early on, they figured out that I was able to collate a tremendous amount of random data and put it all into a really good perspective. So I did inventory. I inventoried everything in maintenance, everything in supply, everything in warehousing, manufacturing and logistics. And then they found out I could inventory all their old paperwork, books, and filing systems. So that's what I did. And I had access to so many old books that had been boxed up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, books falling apart. And when I developed this love for about 6 years, and I was going from prison to prison doing this. And the prisons I had no access to because I was a maximum security inmate. Maximum security can't go on medium or minimum security. So I had those in the there is a mail system that's intra-system. It doesn't have anything to do with the U.S. Postal Service. Because there's so much material going from unit to unit between administrators that they have their own shuttle system when they're transferring inmates from different prisons. Materials also follow. So I started collecting all the books. I started writing libraries and librarians and other units and telling them what I was doing. I need these books over here, sent over here. In exchange, I would send them a bunch of books I've either read or whatever. One-from-one book exchanges. Well, after 6 years of doing this, I got in contact with Paul Tice of Booktree. He was Zechariah Sitchin's personal videographer, but when he and Zechariah Sitchin finished traveling the world and were no longer documenting all these things, and Zechariah Sitchin started publishing all his books, Paul Tice went into publishing. Right. Paul Tice started Booktree Press in San Diego, and he's published many books, one by Zechariah Sitchin, Jordan Maxwell, Jack Barringer, Neil Freer, the guy we just mentioned about breaking the gospel. Well, Paul Tice reprints books that are 500, 400, 300, 200 years old. Books that are published before World War II is his specialty. His catalog is fantastic. So I got a copy of that catalog, and I spent hundreds of dollars ordering those books. And then one day I sent him a manuscript. That manuscript became my first published book called The Lost Scriptures of Giza. It's all the occult and esoteric material that I had discovered about the Great Pyramid of Egypt that I haven't found in any modern books in the last 100 years.
And you never will either.
So I put this book out, and that instantly led to 5 more book contracts. And he published all those books as well. But he became my benefactor while I was in prison. And I was the only convicted felon in America or in the world that he's ever taken a risk with and published. And he doesn't really publish modern authors. Jordan Maxwell was an exception. I was an exception. Zechariah Sitchin was an exception. Neil Freer and Jack Barringer and Hugh Montgomery. I don't know if you know Hugh Montgomery, but all Hugh Montgomery writes about is Old England, Albion, all kinds of esoteric material about the different knights orders that came up in England, Cornwall, Wales. His books are fascinating, but they're not very popular. Very few people know about them. But his name is Hugh Montgomery. He's written 3 books that are fantastic. So other than that, Paul Tice only publishes reprints, old reprints. So this is why my bibliographies that I've published on my YouTube channel and Archaix Facebook group, my bibliographies are absolutely packed with books a lot of people have never heard of. Those books are not floating around anymore.
Right.
So in the course of data mining all this material, my method, the only method you can really employ is not subject matter, because dealing with too much, if you're trying to find out everything in the universe, there's no filing system for that. So the only thing that I could really resort to was chronology.
Right.
Everything can be dated and everything can be guesstimated. So my files were in chronological order, and I started filling them up. And that's how I began seeing all the patterns. This is what led to discovery after discovery after discovery after discovery. And this is what led basically to the revelation that I am not discovering anything novel. I am bringing back to the table things that ancient men already knew, because the version of history that you and I have been told is bullshit, and that we were technologically advanced first, and we have devolved through a series of very cleverly concealed resets and cataclysms.
So let me share something with the audience and for you, and this is why I know 100%, this is not a belief, this is a knowing, that Jason is right. I have traveled the world extensively. I've been to the Sacred Valley of Peru. I have been to all of the monolithic, geodeidetic, massive stone monuments, in Machu Picchu, throughout the Sacred Valley. I've been everywhere, Sacsayhuaman. I've been all of them. I also, Jason, this is new for you guys because I haven't talked about this other than my inner circle. I went to Morelia, Mexico, which is in Nowhereville, tiny town west of Mexico City, that has the most profound architecture that I have ever seen in my life. More profound than what I found in Machu Picchu and what I found in Sacsayhuaman. In fact, Jason, I have videos. I'll send this to you so you can look at this. You can even talk about this. But I was there literally just a month ago with my wife. We went down there because someone in her family was getting married in that place of all locations. And they have all of these stone, pink stone, that's what they tell you at least, cathedrals. And Jason, the architecture of these things that they tell you is from the 15th century, Baroque Spanish architecture is not replicatable right now.
I believe that.
I mean, you're standing in front of these. And again, this is a very small, depressed financially town in, western central Mexico. The indigenous of the area were literally a quote unquote indigenous group that they said came from South America. I mean, again, none of it makes sense. But when you're standing in front of these things, looking at this and realizing, and again, you're a stonemason, so you're qualified to talk about this. There aren't even tools on the planet right now that can build in the capacity that these people build. And then they tell you it's from the 15th century, and then you think, wait a minute. The United States was the 16th and 17th century, when it was quote unquote slave colony. So putting all of that together, whether I do my research and I read all these books like you, and I'm not nearly as prolific as you, but it's obvious when you're standing there and it, if it quacks and looks like a duck, it's a duck. And so when you see this, you're being lied to. So I want to, get back to you. But again, when you see these things, you realize they don't add up. And by the way, the other thing I said, I didn't say, dude, the people, the indigenous, whether they're Indians or South Americans or whatever, they're 5'5", 5'6". Mm-hmm. And the doorways, Jason, are 22 feet. Now, remember, they're measured in cubits, but they're 22 feet high. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is insanity. Why are they built this size? And then, you hear the idiots and they say, oh, well, the Baroque architecture of Spain in the 15th and 14th century was to oversize everything. Everything is a lie, but you have to stand there to see it. So anyway, I'll get back to you, but I really wanted to quantify what I have experienced personal in my reality to know that you're right.
Yeah, well, you're right. There's a lot of deception, but let me tell you what is true. What we do have preserved in the historical record, we have over 45 references in historical text to Roman Catholic Jesuit agents absolutely rounding up with military force every American codex, every story, everything written down. If they saw any effigies on temple walls, they broke them out with hammers.
Yep.
Whatever they found when they first came over here, the Castilian Spanish conquistadors, whatever they found when they first came over here isn't what they told us. They went through a major campaign of destroying all the knowledge throughout North and Central and South America.
Now, and the conquistadors were sent to destroy in the name of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, they destroyed the entire history. So 100 years later, they could feed us a version of events that was not true. So what they found with Atahualpa in South America, what they found in Cuzco, the Inca were far more sophisticated.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't even treasure gold, but they made everything out of gold. They insulated their temples and government buildings with gold-sheeted walls.
Right.
They used mica on the floor for the electrostatic properties. People could walk barefoot on the floor of temples and sing, and the gold walls and the mica under their feet that would begin to resonate, and everybody together using their voices could absolutely cause levitation and altered states of consciousness. They had all kinds of really interesting. Same thing you find in the Hyphagium in Malta at Hagar Kim. All these resonance chambers, like Phoenix Hill in China, these underground chambers that are specifically built for their acoustic properties and what people could do when they were singing together in those rooms, in those chambers and temples. It was phenomenal. But all of this they attempted to erase. But as far as the technolithic architecture, we cannot replicate Angkor Wat today. Nope. All the temples that we find through Cambodia, they don't get enough attention. if we had true scientists that were going to some of those temples around Angkor Wat, just looking at how the statuary blends in with the aesthetics of the temple walls and the pillars, we can't replicate that today unless we're cheating with concrete molds and using plaster casts and all that. But that's not what how these buildings. This is living rock. They carved that living rock and smoothed it out, and we don't know how. But chisels, if you were to use it the same way that they say Egyptologists built the pyramid, you would see the stress fractures. Right. You would see all the evidence of tooling marks and all that, but you don't.
Right.
We're looking at architecture in many ancient sites that was machined with precision. It wasn't a man using a hand tool. No. It was something else. It was something else. And they were making them fast. I almost want to say 3D. I almost want to say 3D printing, because it's very interesting. It would be a species of 3D printing using lithography that we're not familiar with today. And if we are, then it's a technology that exists in the underworld and has never been released to the surface. Because Jay, I don't know where you're at with this, but I personally believe, and I believe I've uncovered a lot of evidence for this, that there is a technologically advanced civilization that is centuries old, that is beneath our feet, and they release technological advancements under the guise of alien assist, like 1947 Roswell. Those artifacts did not come from space and UFOs. They came from the civilization beneath us. They just wanted us to believe it came from the sky. So the civilization below us has been there for ancient times.
Well, there's many names for them, right? They call them the inner Earth occupants, the Agarthans. What is the name? Not the Hindu. Yeah, the Vril. They also call them in India. They called them the Nagas. I mean, there are so many different inner Earth cultures and populations that come from various mythologies or mythoses, depending on the culture and the area of the planet. So there's no question that they are there. Obviously, I live in Southern California. If you go up north to Mount Shasta, you can find indigenous people that will tell you about portals, that go into Telos and all of these other places that are up there. And again, I know you've read about all these things because, like you said, it can't be covered up, even though they do their best to suppress it. Okay, so let's get into if you want to go a little bit further from where you were in prison to get into this stuff, but let's talk a little bit about the resets. And you don't even really have to talk about them because I have questions to define these when I'm coming. So I actually just take what I just said. Just keep going until you want to answer the questions.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the very last one that happened.
Sure.
We have basically been experiencing a unbroken continuum of history with basically no time dilation anomalies since the year 1902. But we can't claim that for 1901. Something very unusual happened in 1902.
Right.
But whatever happened in 1902, I have 4 videos on 1902. My 5th one is being worked on right now. But something unusual happened in 1902 that was expected. Now, I have a good buddy of mine who watches all my videos, and he goes to Googling things. And, he just sent me some profound information about 1902 that really shocked me. And first of all, to give it some context, I don't know if you're familiar with my 1902 videos, Jay, but I am
absolutely.
I have itemized on my own, from my own research, many organizations, institutes, and companies that all began in 1902 and 1903 just suddenly appeared, and they're not just ordinary. They're not ordinary. All of them exist today. They're not ordinary at all. They all exist today, and they're umbrella corporations that own many other companies that exist today.
That's right.
This is beyond coincidence.
Yes.
Mathematically improbable for this to have happened all in a 12-month period between 2 years. Part of 1902 and part of 1903. So other people have taken up the research and have been sending me emails about everything they have found out. Stuff I never found, but they did. More companies, more organizations, all kinds of. Now, what's really interesting is we can't find any data about what any of the elite were doing at that time. So far, one person found one reference. His name is Matthew. He's a good buddy of mine. Matthew found a reference about the Rockefellers.
Yep.
In 1901, they disappeared. In 1903, they reappeared on the world scene and unleashed all their company. This tells me 1902, just like 1764, was expected. They expected the Phoenix reset, but it wasn't the big one. So as soon as they realized they had another 138 years, as soon as the phenomenon didn't appear to the magnitude that they were expecting, they hit with the boots on the ground. They unleashed all their wealth back into the population. They had taken all their wealth out of the population. All the elite did in 1890. This is why we had the orphan train. This is why we had the plagues, diseases, starvation. We had the collapse of all kinds of control systems all throughout the 1880s and 1890s, 1901. It was a very strange period of time. Things were in chaos. This is when the Bolshevik took power because of the power structure. There was a power vacuum. So the Bolshevik, who had been trying to take power over Western powers for a long time, finally made their move, and they made headway in Russia in 1902,
right.
which ended up erupting into the whole collapse of the Romanovs. But all this begins to make sense when Matthew sent me that email showing me a document that was signed in 1902 about the orphan trains, about the kids, and another document that was signed from a Mason document, and about Rockefeller having disappeared in 1901 and reappearing on the world scene in 1903. Putting all this together, we see what happened. The elite vanished. They hid. They thought this Phoenix episode was going to be a big one, and it wasn't. I documented everything the Phoenix did in 1902. It wasn't a big deal, but it was there. Now, they probably got scared, Jay, because in 1764, they would have been aware that the Astrophysical Journal had documented that astronomer Hoffman had saw it in the month of May, on May 15th. In 1764, and 500,000 Europeans saw it with the naked eye, dark in the sun. But that wasn't the big one either. And as soon as 1764 happened, what happened? The elite again flooded money into Europe and started the Revolutionary War. All the Masons unleashed all their influence and money and rebelled against the crown. Started the United States of America. Right? I mean, 1764, Boston Tea Party, and it just started going from there. So 1764, it wasn't the big one, so the elite knew they had 138 years. They thought 1902 was going to be the big one, so they hid. 1902 came and went. It wasn't the big one. So it tells me, this data set tells me that the elite somewhere lost their calendar. They knew the exact 138-year period, but they lost track of which one they were in. Now they're all the same family. They're spread all over the world. They've been doing this for a long time, and they always hide underground.
Right.
But they do know. Check this out. They do know that this next one, they're not going to make that mistake. This is the big one.
Right.
This is the one they've been preparing for. So.
Okay, so let me ask you a question in that regard. You already answered it. They go underground. Do you think that they have? Obviously, we have the Hadron Collider that they built recently, and they have those big ceremonies, where they're building them underneath the mountains. But do you think they have, insider, secretive meetings where they announce, like, we're going in underground, we're going, into inner Earth or whatever? Or do you think they are actually using technology that literally is like portal beaming, that they're, literally just transmogrifying their physical existence and going through a portal in somewhere in inner Earth? I mean, I know it's speculative, but what do you think?
Well, I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that the Hadron Collider is doing anything other than providing the media something interesting to put out there, providing conspiracy theorists something interesting to talk about. To me, the Hadron Collider network and NASA have one common denominator. They both pull in billions of dollars of funding, but the money's not being spent for what the public is told.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. NASA is pure mind control. NASA's not sending nobody to space. Let me tell you something. I get pissed off that my neighbors still believe that satellites are bouncing telephone deals. Every time I lose signal on my phone, I get pissed because I know it's relay towers. Because I live so far out in the sticks, if it wasn't for a tower being 3 miles from me, I wouldn't have cell service. There ain't nothing in the sky giving me any type of cell service. It's relay towers.
That's right.
It doesn't even matter. In real time, I mean, we already know that sound travels at 1,080 feet per second at sea level. So how in the hell is somebody going to talk to me on a phone in real time from Australia? Why am I not waiting 2.5 minutes? So I'm not on board with NASA. Hasn't done anything ever that they told us. They're not even sending rockets up now, so why are they still taking billions a year?
No, it's all bullshit, dude. It's all bullshit. And by the way, that's one of the questions about the moon. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah,
okay, so, well, just keep going.
So CERN, NASA, and many other things that we take for granted that we believe are a part of the scientific establishment are nothing but a very clever tax. This is another way that the elite can fund more of their materials, just like the IRS. IRS isn't just a tax.
Of course.
Many of the anti-Western, anti-democratic, anti-Republican, anti-American, almost anti-world programs are funded by the very institutions that tax us. Right. We pay for the very things we disagree with. Right. Yeah, they've got the whole world is basically subject to the same group of people. They've been doing this for a very long time.
It's on lock. Yeah, it's on lock. And we're going to get to the archons, the dark archons, the negative AIX, and we're going to get to the hierarchies of benevolence versus malevolent. But okay, so you've gotten through prison, you've read all of these books, like you started publishing all of this stuff online back to what, 2007, 2008?
My very first experience with the internet was through a friend who released my charts. I have charts, visual charts. I did a very extensive chart after about 9-10 years of research showing that, listen, if all this geodetic and all this mathematical information is correct, and I have all my data sets lined up, there's no other conclusion that about 60 different trains of data points, with each one forming a data set, leads to 2046, the month of November, major pole shift. Now, when I say pole shift, I am talking about what the simulacrum does to mimic a pole shift. Lithospheric displacement is not the actual movement of the crust. It's the shifting of the stellosphere that makes us believe our world has moved. I'm a totally different opinion. I believe that we live in a very simulated context. I no longer believe that we live in a heliocentric solar system anymore.
So I know you don't watch movies, neither do I really. I mean, I did a long time ago, but I'm like you. I either read or I meditate, a lot of inner work. But this really, the Truman Show with Jim Carrey is real life, right? Like they're basically showing us that everything is a sim.
Well, I haven't seen the movie, but you're like the 10th person to mention that movie in my podcast. I've never. I guess one of these days I'm gonna have to watch it just so.
Yeah, you should watch it because it's basically Jim Carrey, and they show the stars, as you said. It's a sim. It's a sim. You have a workbook. We can talk about it, but all of it is fake.
Right. Well, concerning the stars, I can tell you something very, very interesting here. Okay. In the 1890s, scientists took pictures in 3 different locations to triangulate. 3 different locations in the world. They took pictures of a certain area of space. I don't remember which it was. They just took pictures. These were widely published. Charles Fort talks about these experiments.
By the way, just so you know, Charles Fort is my idol. I read Village of the Damned when I was 11 years old, and I was like, what?
I love that man. I love that man. So they waited 6 months. They waited 6 months because if the world is going around the sun, then 6 months into the future, the world would be 186 million miles away from the first place they took those photographs. So they triangulated and took those photographs again at the same star of the heavens. And what they should have found is what's called parallax. There should have been slight shifts in the luminaries, but there wasn't. And that's impossible. But it's not impossible except for the current model that's been foisted upon us about space being actually real. Now, if this is a holographic template of luminaries that are stuck in superposition with each other, there's nothing mysterious about it. Right. But if it's a real universe that we're looking at, we should have saw parallax. In addition to that, I have made the actual have published the actual findings that there is a certain order of stars that astronomers have always been mystified by. They don't behave like the other luminaries. They have named these variable stars. They call them variable stars. Almost all variable stars are red and deep red. But what's really interesting about them is they change their magnitudes, and it's not predictable. It's not understandable how they can go so bright and go back and dim. It's almost as if the cosmos, what we perceive of the cosmos, is communicating with itself.
Right.
Now, the most interesting thing that I have found is when things are going very bad on Earth, those variable stars are blinking chaotically. The ancients see them. To me, I don't see it the way the ancients do. I don't see the stars attacking me like they did. I don't see the stars being just basically all the different eyes. Like Hipparchus says, 10,080 eyes that attack mankind, the fixed stars in heaven. I don't see that. I see hundreds of thousands of little holographic projectors that are basically creating phenomena in our skies for us to believe is real. Like this, like the phoenix, a fiery red dragon appears in the sky, causes volcanoes, earthquakes. It brings with it vapor canopy phenomena, and it dumps a tremendous amount of red rain, red dust, and red mud on our world, buries whole cities. So, the phoenix phenomenon is when all these variable stars start going off chaotically, like they did in 1902 and many other times the phoenix appeared. So I just wanted to let you know that's another reason why I don't believe that the sky is real. I believe that we're looking into an artificial construct from within, and it is deceitful. It is designed for us to make the assumption that we're living in a heliocentric model. And I get a lot of flat earthers that get irritated with me because they say, "Oh man, you're a globe tard, or listen to me. They call me a globe tard. They call me they say, "Oh, you believe in a heliocentric model, man? It says you're not even in the conversation." So listen to this. I tell them, listen, I'm a simulationist, and in a way they're right. They say, "Oh, you just say that because it protects you from being in the controversy." But they don't understand. I've already moved away from flat earth. I'm done with it. If everything is simulated, now we need to understand certain things that cannot be denied. Right. One of them is the phases of the moon.
Right.
The phases of the moon are specifically there to make you believe that moon is spherical, and therefore the sun is spherical, and therefore the shadow on the moon would necessarily infer to any intelligent observer that everything else in space would be spherical. Therefore, there are planets to be looked at. So when we have the sky projecting phenomena that induces us to make certain deductions, then that means the sky is emanating deceit.
Right.
This opens up another can of worms. Okay, what would want to deceive us into believing that all this is travelable, that we can actually come up here, that we can go to other worlds and stuff? Why would that deception be necessary?
Right.
So this is what I've done. I've gone through all these deductive reasonings and chased this data to its final conclusions that we're in a simulation. And the only thing that I can conclude, Jay, is that we are in a simulation that is almost an exact copy of a real system. Right. And that something is being studied and that we volunteered for this.
Yes.
Because I don't feel danger. I don't feel any bad vibrations about the future like I used to. My Christian puritanical upbringing had me fearing hell, had me fearing making mistakes. But making mistakes is the greatest thing to learning new material.
That's
because once you have isolated everything that is wrong, there's nothing left to look at but what is right.
That's exactly right. And let me quantify that even deeper. You have to get to a level of awareness. And again, some of you guys are younger and maybe you're there now. I spoke to some, true ascended masters, as I would call them, this morning, and they're in their early 20s. They don't have the experience, but they do have many probably lifetimes. I want to get to your take on reincarnation and living life cycles and all that. But I agree with you. We have volunteered. The New Age people would say you incarnated into here because you had free will choice for of evolution and growth of your soul. You know, we could call it our chi, our orgone energy, our auric field, whatever you want to call it. But that is who we really are, Jason. As you know, we are not these avatar physical body beings. We are spiritual energy of standing waves or oscillating waves and vibrating atoms and molecules, which, as you know, are very viscous and, congealed at this low vibrational frequency. So the truth is that we're not these bodies, and people have to get to a place of awareness where you're that body. You're not Jason Breshears. I'm not Jay Campbell. I'm not this personality or this ego or this mind. I am a spiritual being having a physical avatar body experience in this third dimension of time space, which, that's a whole nother construct, because we're not even in a time. There is no time outside of this dimensional reality. They've got us believing in this dualistic, polarized, opposite, left, right, dark, night, good and bad. It's all bullshit to get us, as you say, to opt into the AIX. And we haven't talked about AIX, and we'll define it. But AIX wants you to build a simulation of reality that they influence and they create through the narrative of the media and all of those other things. And once you wake up to that reality that you're not what it wants you to believe you are, which is, again, a physical body, then you are in control of your personal reality, which you talk about, and you can talk about in a second, which you can create through your words, thoughts, and actions. And we're going to talk about consciousness towards the end when I ask the questions. But it really is true. I'm with you. I am totally positive. All these guys that are watching right now that are my friends and fans and audience will say, Jay is the raise your vibration guy. We're building the new earth. We're creating a golden age. And yes, there's a lot of dark shit happening right now with the V and Co and all that stuff. But a lot of us, especially you and I and all you guys watching, we are co-creating consciously a new experience. And so, Jason can quantify that by saying that the Nemesis event is literally going to get rid of the dark side. And we are going to have a golden age, or again, a new age or a new earth or whatever. But it has to happen, Jason. I mean, again, I just came back from Mexico, not Morelia, the Yucatan, and the water is so polluted now. Okay, in the most pristine beaches and pristine ocean in the world, there's nothing but seaweed growing along these amazing shores in the Yucatan Peninsula now, because we have destroyed this planet, through AIX and all the dark shit. They don't care. They're not procreation like we are. But there has to be a shift. There has to be a change. There has to be a reset. There has to be Earth, Gaia, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it. It has to be reborn. It has to.
I agree, man. It's I do want to address something, because I'm looking at your chat as you were talking, and I saw somebody ask if astrology is real. And I have to listen. I had somebody do an astrology chart on me, and I was born June 9th, 1973, about 12:01 p.m. My birth was induced because my mom was 16 years old and she was very, very petite. I am not petite, so she was terrified. And there was a doctor in Houston at the time who was doing these experimental births in a bathtub, and it had something to do with buoyancy and doing away with the pain. He sedated her and then had her basically in a warm bathtub, and she doesn't remember giving birth to me at all. She just woke up and I was already born.
Yeah,
I was born.
Baby.
I was born underwater. So I had a lady do an astrology deal on me, and it was really compelling. So I ordered this book, and in the Archaix Facebook page, I put the entire manuscript of the book is in the file section. It's a PDF. It's only about 100-page book, but it was written a very long time ago, and it's called Astrology of Your Life or something. But when I read Gemini and I read June 9th, I was so shocked that it instantly all my powers of deduction chords were struck. I refused to believe that I had read what I just read. So I opened it up to Libra, I opened it up to Taurus, I opened it up to Capricorn. I started reading all these different ones. Nothing in that book nailed me to a T. Nothing. You share characteristics with all kinds of people. But June 9th, 1973, at around noon, what that book said nailed me to a T. Even my negative character traits were in that. I could not believe it. So I shared it in the files in the Archaix Facebook group for everybody to check it out on their own. The reason I'm telling you this story is because just because the stellosphere isn't real luminaries does not detract at all from the fact that you're looking at information. You're looking at coding in the sky. Those star patterns have value because for thousands of years they have basically denoted certain character traits that people share when they're born at certain times wherever those coded star patterns are. Astrology doesn't lose any significance in simulation theory when you take consideration that a simulation is nothing but basically coding and photons. Then astrology actually takes on a much deeper meaning. You're looking at the software of the system itself by which we're living through. That when I was born, there was a holographic template of how Jason Breshears was basically going to be. So certain reality tunnels were created for me. And I went through some dark ones. I probably could have went through some better ones. But if I went through the better ones, I wouldn't be who I am today. And
that's right. And back to that, let's go deeper. We are, again, quantum entanglement, particle physics. We now know that we are biophotonic plasma electric discharges. That's literally what we are. When you think of oscillating waves and vibrating molecules or atoms, that's what we are. We are literally plasmatic fire. Think of like an orange orb being. And so you're right. I mean, this is really what we are. I want to go back to what said something about, and now I lost my train of thought. But the Essenes, astrology. I know you've read books on the Essenes. That was an incredible group of beings. The Essenes literally would not let people marry who were not astrologically coordinated. If you know that, right? So you could not marry somebody like a Sagittarius with a Pisces, or an Aquarius with another one. And so it's like when you start seeing this and you know that these beings were probably working with the benefactor, they have a name, they call them the Kalu, and they're like the benevolent watchers, then you realize that all of this shit is right, Jason. Whether we're in a simulated reality or not, there is reality in the star patterns and the star coding. And again, how many people in the indigenous community will tell you that you are a star being? That you're made up of energy from the cosmos.
That was a fundamental tenet of the Orphic ancient Greek Achaean faith, was that human souls came from the stars.
That's right.
That was the Orphic. For those who don't know, a lot of Christian beliefs came from the Gnosis, but the Gnosis developed straight out of the Orphic faith. And the ancient Greeks were far more Christian than you'll ever realize.
Right.
They were.
Right. And by the way, just so you know, the Essene, the Gnostics, the Cathars, the true Christianity is legit. But as you know, Jason, it was hijacked by Constantine and Justin and whoever else was behind it, the demonic dark archons, whatever. But at the end of the day, the way was true Christianity, and it was the way of Yeshua. And that's one of the questions we're going to talk about. Jesus Christ, the mythological inversion of the Roman Catholics, and Yeshua, the avatar being, the benevolent that came into this, holographic reality that you call. But anyway, there's no question that there are tenets in every ancient text or precepts that are legit. And it takes, as I like to say, and again, this is my opinion, but it takes a pure heart to truly discern what is real and what is not. And so many people do not have a pure heart because they are being led by AIX in everything.
Yeah, I agree. It's that's a real deep rabbit hole about the origin of Christianity. And it's hard. I've had to put out an entire playlist called Dark Scriptures, and I had to lay it on thick and strong and actual cite all the biblical passages in those videos because people aren't readily going to believe what the Bible is actually conveying if they see it. So,
by the way, let me ask you a question in that regard. And I've heard other scholars talk about this, but do you also agree that the Bible is absolutely pure allegory and that the real benevolence that were involved in the Bible had to keep it that way so that the quote unquote herd could understand it in a way that they would not get confused?
here's how I'm going to answer that.
Yeah.
You are a spiritual, immortal being, and in essence, there's nothing physical in this world that can save you, or actually have any substantial meaning to you. The physical world is actually a tool. It can be manipulated, it can be used, it can be enjoyed. Now, taking that into consideration, we find all throughout the biblical narrative some very profound, deeply spiritual food. We find it all through the Bible. We find it all in the parables, and we find it all in the things that Jesus spoke and all that. However, every bit of this immortal food, we can call it manna, angel's food, is all wrapped up in this fictive, physical history that never happened. All this material is put together in all these ingenious little stories. Now, you have to understand, when I say it hasn't happened, it never happened in the context that it's given to us.
Right.
But we already know that the story of Moses was real. It just didn't happen in Egypt, and he wasn't Egyptian. It was Sargon of Akkad who was put on a river in a basket, and an Enaitu priestess of Sumer found him and raised him up, and didn't even know that he was actually of the blood of kings, and he was raised up and as Sharokin. He became one of the mightiest kings of Akkad. Goes by many names in the ancient East. But we already know that David wasn't a real Jewish king. He comes from the Canaanite epos from Ugarit of Davidu the giant slayer. We know that Solomon came. Biblical archaeologists are the most unchristian people in the world. They don't believe. Yeah, biblical scholars are basically, they're not agnostics. I wouldn't call them agnostic, but I would say about 90% of all biblical scholars, academics who have studied the Bible, they don't believe in it at all. They have studied. Yeah, they've put out, this is the type of material I've read, because you got to get to the core material. You have to see what's actually been found and compare it, like the Psalms. Many of the Psalms, we are told they were written by the Jews. Listen, they weren't.
Right.
Word for word, we have found Canaanite texts. We have found Eblaetic texts. We have found Amorite texts from Mari. We have found entire funerary texts and ossuaries from ancient Egypt, all in the Psalm, copied word for word. So when I'm saying it's not true, I'm saying it's not true from the Jewish perspective, that when they wrapped all these ancient texts together and they created this Old Testament, that's where the deceit came in. The actual stories are real, but they belong to other older peoples.
Right.
Even the Great Flood. The Great Flood is a story that belongs to all humanity, but it's a story that was conveyed very differently according to what culture you lived in. I'll give you an example. There are no sub-Saharan African stories about the Great Flood, as if the event never happened there.
Right.
However, in the northern Europe and the Russian steppes, all the way to Mongolia, they all shared the same story, and it was really interesting because this is from Oriental all the way into Occidental, but they shared the story that the sky fell. It was very wet, but it brought a like a miniature ice age, a cold. Right. Because the time before that it was very hot. Ancient Native Americans said the same thing. It says before the birth of the sun, the world was a dark purple light. And it was always wet and very, very warm.
Right, and that's describing the vapor canopy. Now, was the vapor canopy? And again, this is not speculation, guys. The other guy, R.A. Boulay, who I know who you're familiar with, also declined the vapor canopy in a lot of his books. But was the vapor canopy global? Was it like the entire planetary wide, or were there places that didn't have a vapor canopy?
No, a vapor canopy cannot exist unless it's covering the entire world. And it doesn't matter what your model of the world is. If you believe you're in a flat Earth under a dome, that's no different. It's no different than being on a globe like Venus. Venus is a vapor canopy world. Venus has a vapor canopy today. So a vapor canopy world has a mesosphere that is so packed with water that it's literally an ocean above and an ocean on the surface. And in between, the atmospheric pressure is so much and the oxygen content is so dense that we have nitrogen and all kinds of nutrients that are saturating the soil, causing animals, fauna and flora to grow to extraordinary sizes. And sunlight, that just the right amount of ambient light and ambient radiation actually improves growth conditions, filters out all harmful UV rays. And when a world is going through this for 1,656 years, like Genesis describes, which is true history, the pre-flood world, then you have gigantic reptiles, gigantic amphibians, humans become gigantic, but the people that were living at that time didn't consider themselves gigantic. It was after the collapse of the vapor canopy that humans born after the vapor canopy regarded their own predecessors as titans. It was a totally different biosphere.
So let's separate that then. So in your research and my research, I think we agree. You had 8.5 to 9.5. Again, they were measured in cubits if you were reading from the Middle East, but 8.5 to 9.5 foot bodies, tall humanoid. Again, we know that the Smithsonian has gotten rid of all their skeletons. There were tons of them in the Western North American continent, in Southern California. What was Southern California, Southern Colorado. And again, they've moved them. But the Titans themselves, I want you to kind of connect them to the pantheon of like the Greek and the Roman gods. Mm-hmm. These were truly, and by the way, Michael Tellinger, I know you're familiar with Michael Tellinger. I'm sure you've read his works too, Slave Species, but he was about, and I know Michael, I've met him personally at a couple of conferences and we've talked and exchanged emails, but Michael was about to come out 3 years ago before the big C happened with a book, which he scuttled, that was going to prove that these titans did exist and that by his estimation, they were anywhere from 150, I'm not making this up, by the way, guys, 150 to 300 feet tall. And he also, and Jason, I'm sure you've read this, he also was about to put out the theory that the majority of the stone monuments and again, these geodetic, megalithic, buildings were created out of the mortal and pestle of the bone fragments of these leftover titans.
Wow. Well, it would take first of all, for anybody to be that size, we already know it's common sense. A high school kid could answer that question and say, we don't have enough oxygen in the air today for that. But a vapor canopy solves that problem. Right. A vapor canopy had animals growing to heroic sizes. So I'm on board with life forms being absolutely gigantic. It all depends on how long that vapor canopy endures. Right. Because even today, reptiles and amphibians have a unique genetic trait that the rest of us don't share. Right. That trait is if you put them in a moist environment with continual warmth, with no predators, they will not stop growing. Right. They'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Keep feeding them. The only thing that restricts their growth is their ability to inhale enough oxygen. Once they hit that plateau, they'll stop growing.
Okay, so along that veil, this is one of the bonus questions, but it has to be asked because it's perfect timing. Are the dinosaurs completely disinfo? Are they leading us down a path, or are they real?
Okay, well, strictly as a chronologist, with about 100% of my materials all from books, I have to basically filter that answer, because my personal opinion is we had gigantic reptiles and gigantic amphibians, and they grew to huge sizes. But we also had gigantic humans. We had gigantic rabbits. What I don't like is the geologic compartmentalization by Charles Lyell and scientists trying to promote a theory that there were millions of years ago, 65 million years ago, when over and over and over, the very index fossils by which they dated these prehistoric life forms are found by fishing boats off the coast of Japan, are found in Australia in a lake. These index fossils are 65 million years old. So what are they doing alive swimming around? Why have you not remodeled your theories to conform with the fact that amino acids have been found in a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull? How is that possible? Why are there peat bogs in Florida where they're pulling up human remains with gigantic reptilian life forms? It doesn't make sense. I mean, it all makes sense to me. Under a vapor canopy, everything can live together. Under a vapor canopy, I mean, this is why we have so many marsupial life forms still existing today. They're from the vapor canopy world. Right. Mammals were gigantic too, but placentals still exist today. We are placentals.
Right.
However, we are absolutely genetically modified because when an embryo attaches to the uterine wall in a female, that is a parasite trait. That is not natural in nature. Mammals are born in sacks.
Right.
And the mothers have to tear them open with their teeth and clean them off. Humans are not this way. When an embryo attaches to the uterine wall, it's just like a parasite. It's almost as if humans were manufactured. We are not natural creations. Now,
well, that's obvious. So wait a minute. One other question then around this, and it just came to me, and I don't know, and you probably don't know. There's so much in our mythos of our history, even in science fiction and today and movies and videos and all that. You know, you think of Lord of the Rings. The dragon is so symbolic. Is the dragon, you got Mud Fossil, I know you guys are going to say, Mud Fossil's got all these skeletons all over the planet. He shows these dragons are 500 or 600 feet. Now, granted, is it possible that the dragon is what is real, again, knowing that they could have existed under the vapor canopy and grown to that size as reptilian or whatever, and that dinosaurs is the disinfo similar to like what NASA and all the shit they're doing? Because look, Crichton and Spielberg and Lucas and all these mofos went busy about 10 years ago with this Jurassic Park bullshit.
Yeah.
And they started, taking us down this path of like altering DNA. Again, all of these guys are, as you know, Jesuit, Freemason, masters, dark magicians, whatever, part of this elite group that goes underground into hiding. But do you think it was like a throwaway that they set us down a goose chase and that's what dinos are? And the real truth is that they were dragons?
I don't know. I mean, this is so far beyond my purview of research. Sure. I don't know. I do know that there are accounts. For those who are interested, you can read the writings of David Hatcher Childress in the Lost Cities collection of books. And he has many references to actual documents from the 1800s where explorers came across gigantic winged creatures. They could have easily picked up a man. They couldn't identify them. They couldn't identify their species or birth. And later on, other researchers reading these scientific reports swore up and down they were describing pterodons and pterodactyls. Right. But even later after that, scientists said, no, that's impossible because they died 65 million years ago. So once they set on the KT boundary date of 65 million years ago, it's over with. Everything is everything's untrue. Everything's false. It's all bullshit because it couldn't be true. It's 65 million years ago. Like, I'll give you another example. In 1805, at the Strait of Gibraltar, the British had decided to put a cannon battery in the mountain right there at the Pillars of Hercules. So they dynamited this whole area out so they could put these gigantic cannons in there because the British wanted to control all traffic going in through the Strait of Gibraltar. It's such a narrow pass, ships from the Atlantic would be under their cannonade when they passed into the Mediterranean. So the British had a fort on both sides of the Pillars of Hercules. They were going to deal with all traffic coming in. As they were dynamiting all this in 1805, they dynamited this area of limestone, opened up a cavern, and scientifically documented. They sent all the samples home to the Royal Society, but there was a gigantic leathery winged creature with a bunch of eggs that went into stasis hibernation. It defies explanation. It's almost as if a tremendous amount of mud had been dumped on it and then actually hardened by intense heat within seconds and trapped this creature in a bubble. And that creature just hibernated in stasis for at least 1,000 years or so and was just there. And they said it squawked 2 or 3 times, fell forward when it tried to spread its wings out, and basically turned to dust in front of them once it had contact with oxygen. And now, this is not the only one from 1805. Many, many accounts of miners going into caves, opening up different areas, have come into contact with all kinds of prehistoric type life forms that were in deep hibernation, as if they've got rapidly entombed and buried, just like turtles and frogs today, that when the desert dries out so bad and it doesn't rain for another 11, 12 years, those same turtles and frogs come right back to life as soon as that area fills back up with water.
That's crazy.
It has been documented that amphibians and reptiles can live for very long periods of time in stasis. Absolute. I'm talking about right on the verge of death, and their DNA is activated, and they come back to life as soon as they are basically hydrogenated. As soon as they have contact with water.
So would you say then that, like, during these super cataclysmic events, you know, with the Nemesis deals where there was like liquefaction and freeze, you know, we have all these, you know, we found the mammals and the woolly mammoths freeze, literally flash frozen.
Yes, they were.
Is that what we're talking about right here, where that event occurred and that's what ended up happening? Or, I mean, is that something different?
Well, we have two, in our past, we have two basically extinction level events that don't make sense. There should have been nothing to survive. This is another reason why I am a simulationist, because I believe that there is no gradual development of humans. I believe that we were manufactured somewhere else. I'll just call it like I see it. The historical record to me looks like that this world we're living on already had basically black people, African Americans in different geographical areas. Then all of a sudden we had Mongolid types in different types of areas. Then all of a sudden we have what we basically call Cro-Magnon, which are not the people that we're told they are, because we have a lot of researchers now coming out telling the truth about what they're finding in Cro-Magnon graves. They're finding plaid clothes, which is very hard to read. They're finding pearl buttons. They're finding very ornate metallurgy. We're talking about Cro-Magnon, Aurignacian. We're talking about these are supposed to be people who lived 30 and 40,000 years ago, but they had button-down jeans. They had boots that looked just identical to ours today. And the cranial capacities was 300 cc's more than what we have today. Their arms are short. The men were 6'5" to 7 foot tall, but they had short arms. Right. Yet all of the females were petite. This means we're dealing with a very technologically advanced sedentary race. Right. The Cro-Magnons lost their infrastructure. The only ones to survive are just like the Book of Revelations. Everybody runs to the kings and hides in the caves of the earth and underground. So when this cataclysm happened, this is why we find this magnificent cave art. A people who have lost all their infrastructure have nothing else but art. So they draw on these, and this is why that artwork of the Aurignacians and the Cro-Magnon is so anatomically precise. These people were advanced, but they lost everything, completely lost everything. When they came out of those caves, they built the civilizations that we're familiar with today.
Right. So do you think the architects of us, you know, these were created beings in this, you know, simulacrum, do you think they created the Denisovians, the Cro-Magnons, the Neanderthals, and then we were the final version of all of those? That, you know, because again, you know, if you ever did a what do you call it, an ancestry or a 23andMe analysis, you know, they break it down based on like, so much of you is sapiens, so much of you is Denisovian, so much of you is Neanderthal. So it's like they know, but it's like, how did or why did those versions of quote unquote us disappear? And now, you know, the accepted version. And again, of course, as you said, there's probably Cro-Magnons and Denisovians and Neanderthals living underground in inner Earth colonies or cities. But why are sapiens the last remaining above ground, you know, again, like pro surface? Are we just the most entrained, the most easily hypnotized by AIX, and that's why we're the surviving group?
Well, I think there's been several modifications to the species. And like, I'll give you an example. Cro-Magnon didn't have the intellect that was necessary to actually give life to this experiment, this project. Cro-Magnon was a hunter-gatherer. Cro-Magnon was absolutely strong. But we have actual scientific reports now. Anybody can find these. Archaeologists have found Cro-Magnon camps now that are Neanderthal camps that are full of Cro-Magnon bones.
Right. Wow.
Meaning Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal coexisted.
That's right.
Something happened to cause the infrastructure for Cro-Magnon to collapse. Once it collapsed, they were defenseless, and all the hordes that were way outside the populated areas, now they were free game. So those few that were stragglers and left alone and not in the larger communities, surviving communities, they were hunted and eaten by the Neanderthals. This is not theoretical. This has now been proven. Cro-Magnon bones have been found in the burn pile camp, in the boneyards of everything that was eaten by the Neanderthals. So we have a situation where Cro-Magnon at one time was technologically advanced, and from the actual wounds we see on Neanderthal skulls, they were shooting them in the head with weapons.
Yep.
Neanderthal didn't go near Cro-Magnon. They feared Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon allegedly came second. But Cro-Magnon, like I said, with the larger cranial capacity and the very short arms, could have never descended from Neanderthal.
That's right.
The Neanderthal were stupid, basically, with long arms and probably 10 times stronger in body mass index than the Cro-Magnon. Although Cro-Magnon were very stronger than we are.
Sure.
So where the situation, the actual education that we've received from the establishment about Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon is absolute bullshit. It's all a lie. You can piece it together by the scientific reports of what has been found. We're dealing with an advanced civilization that was sedentary. You don't develop short arms unless you've lived a technologically advanced life for a very long period of time. And the absolute proof of that is that the women were petite, but the men were 6.5 feet to 7 foot tall on average. To have males that are that large and females that are that small, that are basically reproducing the race every time they copulate, producing more males that are that large and females stay that short, it's because they have reached they have attained such a level of advancement that they're basically policing their own genome. And but whatever happened totally wiped out their infrastructure. And the few survivors were in the caves, and they left us beautiful murals as they were hunted down by the Neanderthal. So this is the actual story of what happened, and this is before the vapor canopy. This is before the Great Flood event. This is before any of the history of the Bible began. But it wasn't 30,000 years ago. It was much sooner than that.
Okay. So we're about 90 minutes into this. I want to ask you these questions because you're on fire right now and you're vibrating. We're both in resonance.
Yeah.
Now, again, some of these questions are going to be basic for you, but not for everybody watching. And yes, some of you guys are going to be like, Jay, why are you asking these questions? You know the answers. But I'm doing this for the future people to come and watch this so that Jason can stop repeating this shit and he can say, go watch that podcast. I'm not answering that question again. Okay. So the first question is, what is the simulacrum? Is this different? Now, again, I'm going to make these, harder, not for you, but for people to understand. Is this different from what people hear when the words simulation or the matrix are mentioned? And then to tie it up for you to make it even better, what do the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls say about the simulacrum?
Okay, check this out. The simulacrum is a construct. It does not regard good and evil. It doesn't care about duality. It doesn't do it. It's just a construct. So we're going to simplify this in the easiest terms for everybody. The simulacrum that we exist inside is no different than a Star Trek holodeck. It is 100% technological. It has no agenda. It has nothing at all. But what it does is phenomenal because it doesn't respond to human speech. It doesn't regard language. It doesn't care about none of those. It only responds to two things. One is it can absolutely read your mental blueprints. What you project into your informed field in your reality, it can read all that, but it remains a neutralized field unless your physical avatar does something inside the simulacrum that it can translate as you moving into the direction of the mental template you created. As soon as that one dynamic is met, it begins to build for you a reality tunnel that will commiserate with what you're trying to do. I do this every day. Right now, you would not believe all the resources that have come to me just in the last month since I began.
I believe it too. It's happening to me too. It's happening
Yes,
to
I
me
mean,
too.
all I
It's
did was
resonance.
decide.
It's resonance. It's the energetic field of resonance. We are vibrating in sync, and we are creating this opportunity, this reality tunnel, as you call it,
Right.
to bring this information to us, because we are actually also ready to receive it.
I agree. In my own case, I had made the executive decision about 2 months ago that I said, you know what? I've already released over 200 videos. I've released all these uploads. It's now time for me to start taking a more active role in putting this information out. So I went ahead and decided I'm going to build a better website. I'm gonna start releasing more comprehensive data. And right when I made that decision, I'm talking about within days of making that decision, somebody I've never met in my life, didn't know existed. I have never watched any of his videos. I don't know anything about him, but across the simulacrum, he and I must have been vibrating at the same frequency. I had a need and he met it. Now, I haven't really talked much with him, but his name is Santos Bonacci. I know you've heard of him.
Of course, yeah.
So he asked me if I wanted to come on a podcast. Now, he only asked me a few questions, and I answered those, and he participated just a little bit. But it was Logan of Decode Your Reality that was the one actually interviewing me. So I was invited back, and I came back. Well, I'm going to do another podcast like on July 2nd with Santos. But he's the one that the universe sent to me when I had made that decision. Hey, you know what? It's time. I've already put out too many videos. I can't just keep doing uploads, and I haven't actually broadcast myself out there. So he started the ball rolling, and it rolled fast. I'm talking about within 3 weeks, I went up 4,000 subscribers, and then I went up another 4,000 2 weeks after that, and then I went on a roll, getting 1,000 subscribers every 3 days, in the past week. So
imagine how many you're going to get in the next week. And by the way, you're right. And I want to add to that, then you went on with Alpha Vedic guys who are close personal friends of mine.
Okay.
Then I watched that, and I reached out to Mike and said, hey, introduce me to Jason. I want to bring him up next. I want to go deeper. But honestly, bro, yes, it is an informed field of resonance, and you are creating a better reality, not for just yourself, because you're not in service to yourself. You're in service to creation. This
right, no doubt.
consciousness from Hawkins.
No doubt.
When you're in service to creation, opportunities are literally attracted to you.
I agree. I'm as a matter of fact, my belief in God my research did not take away from my belief in God. It actually amplified it into it. I have a better understanding of the oversoul. I understand now that I'm living in an artificial construct. Right. Well, a actual, real, true, immortal God is not going to put me into a situation that it can't control in the end. Right. I personally believe, and no one can convince me otherwise, I have read the data, and all the traditions in the world have an underlying story embedded within them that there was a trickster who was actually demonized, called a trickster. A true benefactor entered into this creation and basically won the war for us, so we would never have to worry about anything in the future. The problem is another entity is in here with us. It's not the simulacrum. Let's go back to your first question about the simulacrum. The simulacrum is a vehicle by which immortal spirits can live through an artificial physical existence. It's nothing but a holodeck. It's just a really big one. It's like a Hunger Games dome where all kinds of phenomena can be replicated, and the participants actually believe there's some real danger when there isn't. Now, in Hunger Games, there was real danger. They died. But what I'm saying is, in this context, if you're an immortal being, then a physical God should be offensive to you.
Right.
If everything physical is a tool to be enjoyed, a tool to be utilized, then God is not going to manifest physically. There's no need to. There's no need to immerse yourself in physicality to reach a spiritual audience. If I'm a spirit, I don't need the oversoul to come in here in a physical body. This is what AIX has done, created all these religions to get me to forget that I'm a spirit by thinking God is physical. Because once I start doing that,
that's 100% right. And I don't mean to interrupt you because you're on a roll, but I want to add this so that people can understand what you're saying better. It's externalized saviors. Whether it's your doctor, it's Jesus from the Bible, it's your Catholic priest. It literally, AIX has created a vibration of externalization.
Right.
So that people don't go within to their informed field and create that connection with God, which, I call as your higher self, right? The light of being. And that's what it's done. And so the people that are disconnected, vibrating down here in victimhood and shame and anger and everything else, which, as you know, there are many from the last 2.5 years, we're going to get to that. They are not connected to source, Jason. They do not have an informed field that even allows them to be interested in what you and I are talking about, which should really be the only thing that people are talking about and interested in at this point.
I agree. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. This is why this actually goes in tandem with what you asked earlier. I believe that the biblical material is supernatural. But I'm also going to tell you with the same mouth and in the same moment that the historical stuff you read in it is absolute bullshit. Now, the reason I can take two opposites and basically create a coagulate out of them that I call truth is because the parables of Jesus are images of truth. The messages in the scripture, the stories themselves are a dialogue. It doesn't matter if they actually happen. We're being conveyed very deep things because truth is always given to us in copies and in artificiality and in images. Anything that's given to you straightforward and actual is a product of AIX. It's the physical world. And this is what people have fallen prey to. They believe that if something is in the physical world, you hear it all the time. I don't believe it unless I see it. Well, that is almost the exact opposite of what a spirit does. A spirit lives by intuition.
Right.
Intuition is what guides the spirit, not the eyes. The eyes can see anything. So
that's right.
I believe 100% that the biblical material is supernatural, but it's only supernatural to those who were meant to see. It's not there. It's not there to open up the eyes of the living dead. There are living dead constructs all around us in our communities that are not worthy of this information because they don't have the same soul apparatus we have. This is why they believe everything in the media. This is why they're always going through the thing. They're living in a whole lifelong feedback loop. Every day is the same. They fit into perfect molds. I don't believe that every single person that you see in this reality is these messages are for them. Because I also don't believe that Jay Campbell or Jason Breshears or anybody here, I'm just going to pull a name off, Christopher Shira. I don't believe this man either was ever put here to save anybody. That's not why we're here. Or it's not why we're here at all. Because a true benefactor would have never risked his creation to be lost. Right. Now, would he allow them to think the battle was lost? Would he allow them to think that there might be a problem? Yes, because if I was the creator, I would allow that too, because I know that my creations are going to develop. They're going to become problem-solving engines. I may even put this fantastic riddle of a great pyramid out there just for them to solve. I may do all kinds of things, but in the end, the battle has already been won. There is nothing to fear. And this is the message I would give them, but I would only give it to them in similes, in metaphors, in parables. I would never give it to them direct because that's not what a immortal God would do.
Wow, man. Beautiful, man. You're on fire. Okay, the next question, and again, I know this is basic, but again, for everybody who's watching this, and again, this is frame of thought. We are in frame of consciousness right now. Define AIX. Was it created by the quote-unquote dark archons? Is AIX another name for what you and I have read about, Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, Lucifer, Satan? Is it a negative computer program? I know there's a lot in there for you to compartmentalize and parcel, but answer.
Okay. The idea for AIX came from here. In order to answer your question, you have to follow my reasoning. In the course of my studies, I study history with a calculator in my hand. I want to see all the mathematical patterns. I want to see if there's anything to be discovered in the frequency of plagues and wars and in treaties, mass migrations. I want to see, and I documented thousands and thousands of pages of mathematical notes showing all these events in history, the timelines. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to see if there was something to construct, and I found that there was, and it blew my mind. This is how I found the Nemesis X object periodicity. This is how I found out the Mayan long count does not end in 2012. This is how I found out the 138-year Phoenix protocol. This is how I found out, and I've never revealed this even on my own channel. I have a video in production where I'm going to, but this is also how I found out that AIX has its own 138-year period deals where it tries to mimic the true one to throw people off the calendar, because Phoenix from ancient times was worshipped. It was worshipped in ancient Egypt as the keeper of the calendar, because people knew no matter what happened, no matter if new governments instituted new timekeeping systems or whatever happened, the next time Phoenix appears, we'll be back on that 138-year timeline. And that 138-year timeline was very well known in antiquity. Now, like I said, the elite knew in 1764. They hid. But as soon as they came out of hiding in 1764, they released their wealth into the public. They started a great series of wars, and they overthrew all the monarchies and turned around and started the republics, and all the democracies began the United States. All this happened as soon as they realized that the 138-year period, they were safe. And the Phoenix passed by, but it didn't destroy a lot. So they were safe, and they basically caused all the 1800s to what happened. Then their coward asses went in hiding again around 1899, 1898, 1897. They went hiding again, and that's why we had this great chaotic period at the end of the 1800s. All the wealth had been pulled back out. They're in hiding. 1902 comes around after the month of May. All of a sudden, they come out of hiding. They missed the big one again. They're happy. And what do? They unleash all these corporations, institutions, companies. I mean, even the very things we take for granted today all came about in 1902.
Right.
Believe me, can you survive without air conditioning today? Hell no.
No.
Air conditioning came out in 1902.
That's right.
Almost every vacuum cleaner is invented in 1902. But they weren't. They've been around. The elite have had these inventions over and over and over, and they keep hiding them. So AIX, to me, when I see this all throughout history, AIX, to me, is stirring up the pot. The reason it's called AIX is because now that I have agreed that, okay, all my data sets point to one thing. There is no way the history of the world could have unfolded this mathematically perfect in all these different data sets unless I am inside some type of mathematical holofield. I am in a mathematical construct that I perceive as history. So taking that into consideration and knowing that I have a benefactor who has been with me from the very beginning and has not abandoned me and has left his message in different, like the Essenes in the Dead Sea culture, the Dead Sea text culture, the Egyptian Nag Hammadi text, right. The benefactor has left his signature all throughout the Bible. But it's not what the actual people who are reading the Bible are going to find. It's right. what the errants are going to find when they read it. The errants are going to find the right information in the Nag Hammadi text. They're going to find the information that was meant for them in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, translated by Wallace E. Budge. They're going to find all the clues about who they really are. Errants are going to find these in the Epic of Gilgamesh. They're going to find them in the Atrahasis epic. They're going to find them in the old ancient translations of the Rashamra documents from ancient Canaan. Errants will always be drawn to the sources and the text by which the benefactor had revealed many things about himself. And when we go and reread all these texts, it's obvious who the benefactor is, and whatever this other force is, it's not the benefactor, but it always demonizes the benefactor, calls him the liar, calls him the trickster, calls him the serpent, calls him all kinds of names. But the benefactor never appears in religious texts.
Right.
The benefactor has nothing to do with religion. Is actually old Latin words put together that means to rebind or to bring under bondage again.
That's right. That's right. The Latin is regulare. That's absolutely true. And it is to bind them together.
Yeah. So it's really talking about almost like dungeon cups. But
it is. I mean, think about it. All the Abrahamic teachings are using that same original Latin codex from Word. You know, one of the watchers right now, Jake Parsons, shout out to Jake. He is the 100th monkey on all of the social media. I'll definitely connect you guys. You guys should do a show together. He's a brilliant guy. But he's been saying this for a long time, too, that, you know, they use the root language origin or the etymology of words to hijack, again, our energy fields, because they're using words that are encoded and inverted. And again, there's a great author that a lot of you guys watching, I don't know if you've read any of his work, Jason. Maybe you have. His name is Pierre Sabak. He's a good friend of me and Jake's. I've done a bunch of shows with him. He's another guy that you can talk to or interview with because he's amazing. But I mean, he's literally decoded their inversion of language.
Oh, wow.
So again, they've been doing this for thousands of years.
Okay. Hey, I just saw a comment. I didn't know Apocalypse How. Okay, I didn't know that was his name. But here's your hard drive. He's talking about the hard drive right now in the chat. Okay, Apocalypse How didn't want to order my little flash drives because I have flash drives I offer that are compartmentalized because I have so many Phoenix videos, Phoenix articles, all kinds of hundreds of charts all about the Phoenix. I offered on one flash drive. Then I offered the Anunnaki, the same thing, 49 videos, hundreds of charts, 150 articles, all that on a different flash drive. Well, he contacted me and said, hey, man, look, I just want to cut to the chase, and I want copies of all your data sets, and I'm going to send you a terabyte hard drive. He did. I'm just going to let you know.
Man. Well, good job on that. Good job.
It'll be in the mail tomorrow, man. It'll be in the mail tomorrow. It took
See, that's how amazing you are, bro, that you go out of your way to help people like that. So, again, props to you. Okay, so one question about the Phoenix resets that you kind of haven't answered. You kind of have in your videos, but not tonight, and that is, are they restricted to geographical areas, or are they totally selective based on the consciousness of the collective of that specific area at that time?
Okay. It comes at great difficulty to be really, really assertive in answering this because, one, the amount of records that have been lost prevents me from being really specific.
Sure.
But from what we have, it seems like Phoenix is very, very discriminating. Sometimes it appears 4 times in world history, it basically affected the entire world.
Right.
And it was remembered to do that. Then a couple times it was hemispheric, but every other time it was highly localized. The destruction was intense. People in other cultures that were nearby actually watched it without any harm to themselves.
That's amazing. Which again is more proof again if it's a simulated holographic reality. They're editing time space.
Yes. They listen. What goes on in the field of destruction is harrowing, but Phoenix is not a normal phenomenon. Phoenix actually ignores whole frequency, whole ranges of frequency. If people are vibrating at a certain frequency and low vibrations, and they're in that community, it hones in on them, and the destruction is massive. It's harrowing. It's nightmarish, but at the same time, we have stories from the old world that basically serve as archetypes of people and families and small communities that were in the middle of the storm,
totally spared.
Suffer a single thing. Even their animals and livestock were untouched. Doesn't even make
so what does that have to do with, the whole biblical bullshit of the marking, of the Hebrews above the thing and the sacrifice of the firstborn?
Okay. One thing the rabbis got right was recording these archetypes. They just got the dates wrong. They got the situations wrong. So when it came to the Exodus event, they described how you basically survived the Phoenix. How do we know that it was the Phoenix that destroyed ancient Egypt when the Israelites made their escape? We know this because the rabbis themselves said that every 138 years, the angel of death visits destruction on the world. That's a pretty profound statement because we already know that Phoenix visits every 138 years, like clockwork. And this is, I don't have to say it. I've got like 60 videos on that. So and 3 published books about the Phoenix phenomenon. Anybody who doesn't know by now that we have something very unusual happening to our world every 138 years is just not even part of the conversation. All the data is there, you just haven't reviewed it. But the data is profound. This is what the elite feared in 1764 when they hid. This is what the elite feared in 1902 when they hid. It just, those weren't the big ones. Right. So when you take all that into proper perspective, you understand why the world is so chaotic today. What are they doing? They are burrowing underground. Right. They are getting their facilities ready because they knew in 1764 and they were wrong. They knew in 1902 and they were wrong. Right. This time they know they're not wrong. This is the big one. So they're going to be hiding. So the story you're talking about, Jay, with the Jews talking about the angel of death every 138 years, Egypt, the same thing was said of Sodom and Gomorrah. When Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed from the sky, it was the rabbinical scholars, in the rabbinical writers of the Jewish Haggadah described that as the angel of death appeared in the sky and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot and his family were okay, except for the one member of the family who was still vibrating on the frequency of the inhabitants of the city of Sodom, because she turned around to see what the fate was of those people. So she borrowed some of their frequency. And what happened? She mineralized instantly into a pillar of salt. Phoenix got her too. Phoenix was leaving her alone. She was staying with her family. She's vibrating on their frequency. Phoenix only attacks a certain frequency range. That frequency range is shared by the elite because they all know they have thousands of years of guilt to pay for. This is why they always hide from the Phoenix. They hide from the Phoenix, not because basically they fear that it might kill them, but because it targets that frequency that they're in. All the evil shit you've heard about the elite that's been leaked in the news and all that stuff's probably true, and that's why they have to hide from it. Right. They've got to burrow deep underground because this thing is a range finder, and it's going to find those frequencies and obliterate them. So they hide and they scatter out and they build multiple facilities, and they make sure that the actual power structure is intact. No matter how many facilities are destroyed, if just one survives, they can come back up after with their technology, with a bunch of their wealth and all that stuff, and take back over. This has been going on for a very long period of time.
Amazing, man. I mean, honestly, you've decoded everything, but I have a lot of other questions that are very similar stuff. I'm going to skip through some of them. You briefly mentioned the Anuna, the Anunnaki. Who are they in the veil of, Whit Sitchin and, guys like Gerald Clark, who is a good personal friend of mine, Freer, the people, a lot of people think Tellinger's disinfo. I've been seeing people comment and stuff, but who are they in your research, and are they the ones that are the elites hiding underground, or are there factions of them that are part benefactor, part malevolent?
All right. The story that's unfolding with the elite today and the common people is a very ancient story. It goes back to the 35th century BC. Now, the Anuna, I'm going to hurt some feelings with this, but if anybody wants to see the core material, I have a book that was published in 2011, Anunnaki Homeworld, but the real material is for free, and it's in my videos. It's in my Anuna Files videos, about 49 videos now. But the Anuna were nothing but an invasion of Caucasian people into a non-Caucasian world. The historical records about the appearance of the Anunnaki were all written by non-Caucasian people. They were describing a race of Caucasians, people they had never seen before, with very white-colored skin. They called them Shimsu Hor. They called them shining. They called them shining ones. Right. The Oriental people have always, in their artwork, showed Caucasian people as being giant goggle-eyed. Well, later on, these statues were shown, like the statue of Judea, a Sumerian king. I think it's Gudea or Judea, I don't know. But a Sumerian king from before the flood. He's got big goggle eyes. Shows him and his wife standing there. It's a very famous Sumerian statue. Right. Shows they had. Now, these people, we know they're Caucasians because the black-headed people were the Sumerians who recorded the arrival of these people. Said they came in fleets of ship from a place called Dilmun. Zechariah Sitchin turned this into spaceships, and he changed a very ancient Semitic it's from the old Amorite syllabaries, and in that word is shim or shimu. Zechariah Sitchin lied. He actually said that word is translated as rocket ship, which is an absolute lie. First of all, rocket technology is very primitive, but it did never mention rocket ship. The word shim actually means stone monument. It's a very old word in the Semitic languages. Anybody can verify that in a Strong's concordance. Shem also means monument, but it also has a second meaning, which is name. And I go through a lot of detail in my book, The Lost Scriptures of Giza, my very first published book, where I show all these ancient records that use the word Shem as both monument and name. It was interchangeable because in ancient times, on your property, you raised a pillar. That was your Shem. That pillar had the name of your family on it, and it told everybody who owns this part of the land that Shem was a pillar with your name on it. That's where that concept came from. So Zechariah Sitchin said it was a rocket ship, but that's not what the early Sumerians said. They said these fleets came by way of Dilmun. They had escaped a cataclysm. I have isolated their homeland as North America, and I'm not the only one. All I'm doing is parroting the great researchers and historians of the 1850s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up to about 1920, Lewis Spence. All I'm doing is showing their research. They're the ones that concluded this massive American infrastructure collapsed, and they all sailed to points all in the what basically established the civilizations of the old world.
So would you have classified these guys as the red-haired giants, the Anunnaki? That's who they really were.
Okay. To the olive-skinned, dark-haired, dark-eyed, straight black-haired people of the Urubamba Valley of South America, the same culture that was in the Egyptian Delta. The Greeks called them the Melampides, the Blackfeet, because of the black soil in the Delta area. Right. The same race of people was in the Yangtze Valley of ancient China. The same people was in the Harappan Valley of the Indus Delta. Right. The same people are in the Tigris-Euphrates. The five great river delta civilizations all share the exact same tradition that these basically Caucasian giants showed up on ships in their countries, but they didn't come as conquerors. And
Jason, this would also lead credence to Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl, again in the indigenous of South America, all of them. Same thing.
Yeah, they believed in their return. Yeah. So this is the 35th century BC. This is why all of a sudden anthropologists have always been really shocked by how in the 35th century BC, all of a sudden across Egypt, Elam, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Larak, that whole area, Pakistan, India, all throughout the Fertile Crescent to Jericho, Israel, at the exact same time, all kinds of new cereals appeared, all kinds of new wheats and barleys and things. Right. Some of them come straight from cotton, came straight from the Americas. Cotton is not found anywhere in the world but the ancient Americas. And then it brought it to Egypt. This is where we get the Goshen cotton today. It's not originally from Egypt. It was brought from the Americas. The best cottons in the world are in Goshen and in the Americas. Although cotton is grown in Pakistan and India, but it's a very inferior product. So all of a sudden, domesticated dogs appear in the world. There is not a single shred of evidence from an old tomb or cemetery that domesticated dogs have ever been found anywhere in the old world until this invasion occurred. They brought them from the Americas. We're talking about North America from Mexico all the way up to the mound builder civilization. We're talking about a civilization with an infrastructure that lasted a very long period of time to where they could breed dogs, where they had copper and bronze metallurgy. They were very sophisticated. This is the type of civilization that suddenly appeared in the old world that the Sumerians called the Anuna. They were not yet called the Anunnaki for 1,250 years. Anunnaki is a very late word. It only comes from Babylon. And there's a reason why the name was changed from Anuna to Anunnaki. Today we use them interchangeably, but they're not. The Anuna was a Caucasian race of people who were introduced into a non-Caucasian world. They were bearded and they were tall.
Right.
And the Chinese talk about them as being the Dragon Kings.
That's
the
right.
The people of the serpent. But in that context, the serpent concerned a people who were very, very wise and technologically advanced. Not that they were reptilian.
Right.
They were the people of the serpent. This is why in the Old Testament, this is why the tribe of Dan, which were the Phoenicians that were colonizing almost the entire Mediterranean,
Right.
Greek, the Ionia, Dodona, all the way to...
They were the seafaring people. They were the ones who were the shipbuilders. Yes.
Yeah, the tribe of Dan were known as the Danu and the Danan. And when they invaded ancient Ireland and took on the giants called the Firbolgs, they became the Tuatha De Danann, and they won their independence in Ireland in the Second Battle of Moytura. But that was during, the reason I know this history so well is that was 1135 BC, and it was the Danan who used the Phoenix phenomenon as a tactic against the Firbolgs.
That's right.
So they knew what was going to happen, and they waited for the sun to go dark. They waited for the earthquakes, and then they invaded. And it scared the hell out of the Firbolg. That's how they won.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so then these Anuna, these white, tall, bearded beings, were they a projection of the Simulacrum? I can never pronounce that word. The Simulacrum, or were they put in here? How did they get here?
Okay. What are you talking about? Caucasians or what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, just the Caucasian race and how they just showed up with this advanced technology.
Now, we have to go to the ancient American traditions to answer that because we don't have parallels for that in the old world.
Yeah.
In the ancient American traditions, they're very specific. The Mayan Popol Vuh basically gives you a template showing that the gods on the outside of the creation created a race and they put them somewhere. Then they waited a while to see how they would do. And when they didn't like the outcome, they didn't destroy the race. They just left it alone. Cataclysms happened, but there was always survivors. Then a new race was put in. Now, I'm going to tell you something very strange. I have read researchers like Neil Freer and others. I have read researchers that have put together a phenomenal amount of documentation and evidence to show that there is more evidence that entire races of people just suddenly appeared in this world ex nihilo, just like that, with full memories intact, everything. I'm talking about appeared just like computer program. And check this out. I take a computer program that's running a sim of all these people working in a community. They don't know much about the outside world because they've been on an island for 200 years. In this sim, I suddenly create a disaster. In that disaster, the ocean begins disappearing. Then all of a sudden, I darken the sun. Everybody's going in chaos. I create noise from the sky. Some of the people disappear. And then when the sun comes back on, they're in a new world. I just transplanted an entire code, a whole coded holography that I was running a sim over here. I just overlaid it onto a sim that's already running right here.
Wow.
Those of us today that are deep off into basically computer logistics and especially virtual reality programming systems already know how viable this is to take two different running holographies and then merge them. Only in a hologram can two different realities that are running basically coexisting at the same time be merged together without any interference patterns at all. Only in a hologram could something like that happen. But this is the story we're getting from the ancient records. This is why the ancient Hindu were so fascinated with the concept of Maya. They refused to believe that reality was real. It was illusory. There's something wrong. And you already know, I've said this many times about the Aboriginals. The Aboriginals of Australia have always known we lived in the dream time.
Dream time, that's right.
All students of the Gnosis, we have a lot more details. I'm a student of the Gnosis. As a student of the Gnosis, we have more details about the construct. We understand the role of AIX is basically Yaldabaoth. This This is the antagonizer. This is the one that tries to undo all the works of the benefactor. The benefactor is basically far more powerful, but holds that power in reserve and only basically gives us little tidbits of information as we search for it. That's all it does. It never really actively helps us because all the help that we've ever needed is internal. And I say this a lot too. I tell my listeners all the time, I says, you got to understand who we are. It says, until you understand who you are in the context of this simulated, beautiful holography, you will never understand that you can draw more power than you contain. You can draw from yourself far more help, beneficial material, data, mnemonic enhancements, instant recall. Everything comes from within you, not from without.
That's right.
Everything.
Beautiful. Beautifully stated. Exactly. Okay, so we got a full hour left. I mean, guys, Jason and I could go all night, but man, I got to let the guy get some sleep. We'll go another 90 minutes. I know this is profound, and we have 200 people watching, and I know the comments are amazing. And so, thank you guys for watching. And like I said, there's going to be a time for you guys for the best questions, but I want to get through like my next 15 or 12 questions, and some of them I'm just going to push real quick. But
sure.
So John Lash, who is a Gnostic interpreter, he wrote the book Not in His Image. I know you're familiar with him. He classifies the archons as two species, a reptilian leader species and a amoeboid follower species, which is kind of like a gray, I don't know. But and again, this is his interpretation of the Nag Hammadi. And again, he's a very scholarly, deeply researched Gnostic theorist. What do you think about that? And let me just put it in context, because you kind of said, this whole thing about reptilian, there's a lot of new age disinformation, a lot of bullshit. There's so much with the dragon, again, in our literature. What are, if there are at all, the reptilians? Are they some form of a demonic apparition, a lower density consciousness? Like, what are reptilians? I mean, you have so many people in the ufology, industry and world that talk about them. I look at Willie Tompkins, and again, he could have been, a disinformer, but he wrote the book, Kidnapped by Extraterrestrials or whatever it was. He was 93 years old. He was a product of the underground projects and all the stuff that went on inside, Grumman and, all of that aerospace and stuff. And, he says that the reptilians were real and that these are real beings who impersonate humanoid personages and, quote unquote, can shapeshift. He says they don't shapeshift. He says they use technology. But with your research and everything you've come across, what is your take on this reptilian / archontic amoeboid creation?
Well, you mentioned everybody but David Icke, really.
And I love David, and I've had David Icke. I've interviewed David, and David's great. So I mean, he talks about the reptilian consciousness and that aspect of things too. So thank you for mentioning it. But your answer to that?
Oh, I've only found two places in all my findings, man. I can only cite two places. One was the Dead Sea Scrolls, where there's a mention of maybe the Lamech scroll. I can't remember, but there is in the Dead Sea. I cite it myself in my Chronicon. There's one reference to shape-changing reptilian. Then there's one reference in Acadian text that is mentioned by Zechariah Sitchin. Those are the only two I've ever found in the historical record. That doesn't mean that it's not true.
Right.
Because, okay, you remember in the 80s, the movie They Live.
Absolutely.
Okay, true. You got a trend going through YouTube in the past 10 years or so where people are isolating movies saying, hey, man, here's the truth. This is what we're doing. And I can't say they're wrong. They could be very well revealing truthful information through movies. So I believe they did with Night of the Comet in the 80s, 1984. The movie Night of the Comet was the Phoenix episode perfectly. Right. So when it comes to the reptilian deal, I know that from distant antiquity we have two different, basically, gene types unfolding. I know. Now, in the old records, they're basically between the Anuna and the Agigi. Now, this conflict between the Anuna and the Agigi has never ended. Now, I have never really tried to associate one of them being reptile or not, but if one of them was, then they're the ones that are occupying the underground facilities. They are the ones that can't come to the surface world for whatever reason, and they use human agents to do it. I can incorporate that into my paradigm, but as strictly a chronologist dealing with actual records that I can cite in bibliographies, I've only found 2 references. An Acadian text talking about shape-changing people, gods, or humans that Zechariah Sitchin mentioned, and then the other one being an actual citation from a record in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I just have to be truthful about that. There's only 2 things that I've found. But I have read R.A. Boulet's Flying Serpents and Dragons.
Yeah, that book is profound.
Yes, I love that book. And the fact that he was a U.S. cryptologist and that his dates he provided in there fit perfectly my Phoenix dates and my own Chronicon, I couldn't believe it. I've never met the man. But he came by his analysis totally different than the way I came by mine. But that we got the exact same dates for the same events was awesome.
So he was the first guy that I read about the the vapor canopy in the way that you wrote about it. So you're right. You guys are very synonymous, very, very close. But I mean, look, that dude is very clear. And he says that these reptilian beings were here. And, he even goes into Deuteronomy and, all these Bible texts and talks about like Deuteronomy was a cookbook.
Wow. Yeah.
He straight up says that that's how they were preparing the human sacrifices and the child sacrifices, because these were 16, 17-foot reptilian beings that flew around on dragons, by the way. Again, Boulet, this is all in Boulet's book. Yeah. And they were eating human beings because they were a higher, part of the food chain. I don't want to like rabbit hole on you, but it's in that book. And it's pretty difficult to really truly disencode what he decoded. It's pretty unbelievable shit.
Yeah, it is. I just don't know about the reptilians, and I don't want to support something by inventing information. It's not in my nature. I just don't know. I can see it though. The Mayan Popol Vuh gives off the impression that different types of humans were released here,
right,
for a reason, which goes with my theory about different races of people for different biospheres. So, my own personal interpretation is that every human group appeared ex nihilo. There was no development. There was no gene splicing, whatever, all that. We're all coded. Every single. It's just so weird. Caucasians are the same way. We are the very last to come on the scene. This world was full of matriarchal cultures, stellar calendars, totem societies. This world was packed full of all of that before ever a Caucasian entered the historical record.
That's beautiful, man. This is such a profound podcast. Okay, so we got to get to Jesus, Yeshua, the definition of Jesus Christ, the Christos. You and I go way back in the decoding of all this. Is Jesus Christ just a allegory, again, of the Roman definition, of the Bible definition? Is it an allegorical quantification of all of the avatar benefactor beings or, things that hacked into this reality to show us that the way out was within? Is that really what it is?
Well, it's in order to really break down the fundamentals of the gospel story, we have to isolate all the particulars that it wasn't. We're gonna have to look at that where the deceptions were entered in order to understand what's real and what's fact from fiction. Now, the very first gospel was not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The first gospel was in the possession of a navigator who is a student of the Gnosis, and he has gone in the historical record by the name of Marcion. Marcion collected a lot of the letters of Paul. The only thing he had was the letters of Paul.
Right.
What he had, the original gospel, was called the Gospel of Marcion. It was the story of Jesus with 13 letters of Paul. That's the entire gospel. That's what he had. This he had in his possession before any church fathers ever mentioned any other religious text from the Christian period. So Marcion's gospel is very interesting. Charles Waite, over 100 years ago, published a 500-page book showing all the evidence about the Gospel of Marcion. It is a fascinating book. It's called The Christian Religion for the First 200 Years. Charles Waite's book is very academic. But in that book, you will find he cites all these earlier historians and church councils where it is shown that this man appeared from the East. He had profound things to say, wisdom, teaches, parables, similes, metaphors. Nobody could oppose him. The Jews tried to question him about certain things, and the information just floored them. They could not defend from any of his doctrines. The man was never crucified. There was no earthquake.
Right.
The sun did not darken with an earthquake like in all the Phoenix episodes.
Right.
None of those things happened. He didn't have 12 disciples. He did not weep blood tears in the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't do any of those things. So it's just this beautiful story. Now, we're going to fast forward about 60 years. Now, the Gospel of Marcion was not a gospel.
Right.
Every element of the Gospel of Marcion is compartmentalized into sets. When you read the sets, you're looking at, you can imagine yourself sitting in an amphitheater and you're watching the compression of events as actors act out each set. You understand?
Yes.
All this stuff was a Samaritan Greek play.
Right.
Every bit of it. And when you read, you can read the book of Mark, which is the closest approximation to the book of Mark is the Gospel of Marcion.
That's right.
What you do is you take a yellow marker and you cross out every single miracle, anything that is supernatural in the book of Mark, because that was added later by Jerome and Augustine. None of that was in the original text. His supernatural aspect was his words, what he was teaching. And that's all an immortal errant will ever need, is to hear the truth. We don't need to see a vision. We don't need to see a miracle. We don't need to see somebody healed to know it's possible. So all these physical things were added through the church councils. They were added by the early church fathers. They're not mentioned by the early church fathers. Jerome and Ignatius don't even mention almost any miracle Jesus ever did because they weren't invented until the Gospels were invented. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is packed full of all the miraculous, but the miraculous never appeared in the original. The original Gospel of Marcion was a very spiritual text, but it had nothing mythological in it. It had nothing. There was no healing of the blind. There was no healing of the sick. There was no raising the dead. None of this was in there. But the letters of Paul were in there. But the letters of Paul are a very, very different message than what you read in the gospel. And there's a lot of Christians that don't realize you're looking at two different gospels when you read the words of Jesus and you read the words of Paul. I'm not saying Paul was wrong. I'm saying it's a very different message. So, and Paul's message was to only a very certain, basically a certain ethnicity. He was only concerned with those who were descended from the house of Israel and where they had migrated to, and he named those 7 cities. Those 7 cities he named are the 7 cities that were basically capital cities of all the migrations of the ancient Israelite peoples. He mentions those cities. Those are the letters were addressed to those cities. But Paul's message was very different than Jesus. And I can't really compress all that data into this one podcast. I do have all of it in my playlist.
I know you do. All right, so let's highline summary this. And I know we're going to piss off Christians, and I know there's a lot of Christians in this movement, whatever you want to call what we do, esoteric, truth, research, whatever. But let's just put it this way. The dark archons, AIX, whatever, have hijacked the mythos, the mythology, the ideology of quote unquote Jesus Christ, to teach the people about the quote unquote externalization, that there's a redeemer coming to save them, right? You can fast forward into everything today. Again, my doctor, Donald Trump, the white hats. People are lied to because, again, it's the AIX, information algorithm that they are attracted to because, as you know, Jason, they're unwilling to go inside themselves. And again, we're going to get to that at the end of the show so we can really leave a legacy of this amazing podcast of what can each of you do right now, today, tomorrow, every moment of your waking, now space 0 point moment. But that's what they did. And so again, all these people going to church on Sunday, Mass if you're Catholic, Christian, the whatever, the bully pulpit if you're a Christian. And again, this is not just the Abrahamic Christian side. We're talking to, Jews and Muslims. It's all the same shit. It's the same deception. And, again, I don't want to hurt people's feelings because I understand that some of you guys do get value. People will say, yeah, but Jay, I like the fellowship. I go on Sunday. One of the great Gnostic scripture decipherers is Theodore Nottingham. If you're familiar with any of his works, and his stuff just is mind-blowing in, parabolizing the words of Jesus, as you said, again, whoever he was or if he was at all. And he likens it to Ahura Mazda, to Krishna. Again, all of these great avatar beings and all these different cultures on this planet, could essentially be Jesus, again, Enoch, Moses, whatever. And the truth is that so much of what he said has been literally interpreted, Jason, and not metaphorically or allegorically interpreted. And that's where most people, again, are hijacked. And then, again, it's AIX, because they're not willing to do the quote unquote great work, the spiritual practice of, again, going within and internalizing, again, whether it's meditation or contemplation or introspection or sitting in nature. Again, the stillness is when source consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it, can access you and you can be deprogrammed from AIX. That to me is where we are. And so, again, I don't want to hurt people's feelings, but I know I will. And I know that this is going to get pushed back, because the Bible thumpers, as you once were, are going to come out and attack. But until you get to that level of awareness, when you realize that all of this is a deception designed to externalize your power, you'll never get there. It's that simple.
I agree 100%. I mean, as long as I'm always looking for a savior outside myself, I'll never look for the power within.
That's right.
And as long as the elite can always put a savior before the people,
right,
the people will have faith in him. And then they will exercise that faith. They will fall asleep knowing that they have a savior in a certain individual.
That's
and
right.
then the elite will pull the rug out from and they'll do something. They'll execute that savior. They'll lock him up or they'll assassinate him like John F. Kennedy. And then
Right.
they'll leave this giant vacuum of destitution throughout the entire world, and we'll get stuck with a 9/11 post-emotional period. This is what they do. They do it all the time. They create that frequency that they can build in.
It's a ritual. You said it before. It's a ritual that
Yep.
they then siphon the energetic fuel of who we are as spiritual energy beings, these resonant frequencies where, again, most people are vibrating in dissonance and incoherence, and they are feeding off of that energy, Jason. It's that simple. They really are feeding off that energy.
I do. I believe 100%. You're absolutely correct. It's all about frequency. That's why the phoenix is not to be feared. And for those who fear it, you need to hide. You're not doing anything wrong going to find a cave and trying to get as deep as you can in there if that's what you fear. You need to, because it's going to seek out your frequency. Doesn't mean it's going to find you. It's passed over a lot of people. But the phoenix is harrowing, man. It's all frequency.
Okay, a couple more questions. I want to cover, it's not fair to you if you don't talk a little bit about the pyramids and then the number 138. And then along with that, are the pyramids the frequency generators of keeping this place intact?
Okay, I'm asked that often, and I'm going to have to say no very firmly. Let me explain why. Okay, the pyramid dates itself, and I've showed this many times. The geometry of the pyramid is a calendar. It dates itself at the year 1080 Annus Mundi. 1080 Annus Mundi is our 2815 BC. Now, over 60 scientific samples for radiocarbon dating were taken over a 2-month period of time, and it was astonishing to the scientists to find that they were within 2 to 10 years within the year 2800 BC. They had so many different soil samples, carbon-14 samples taken from the same place, all producing the same year. Basically told them that they know that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was built in about the 29th century BC. So, but the Phoenix phenomenon goes way before that. we have documentation of the Phoenix phenomenon going way before the pyramid was built. The negative default programming phenomenon that we suffer today is dated before the pyramid was ever built.
Right.
So I have to say that the pyramid is for something else. For it to be coded with the 138-year protocol all throughout in 3 dimensions, as I've shown on my channel,
yep.
and in multiple dimensions of phi and pi and curvature equations, we find the number 138 everywhere. It tells me that the Great Pyramid's function was something else. It didn't have anything to do with starting the Phoenix. It didn't have anything to do with starting the AIX protocol. Now, those conclusions are based off arithmetic and geometry. However, let's add in the traditions now. When you add in the traditions, we find out that the Great Pyramid was built by Surid. When you do a bullet point presentation on all the facts that we know about Surid, it's the exact same thing we know about Enoch. And many of them cross over about Enki. So we have these data sets that go down. As a benefactor who was falsely accused of something and later punished or made to vanish from the earth, this benefactor is the one that created this pyramid. This benefactor did something that basically pissed AIX off. I believe that the Great Pyramid actually injected new coding protocols into the simulacrum. And it did it from within it, so AIX could not stop it at all. I believe that the war has already been won and that we have volunteered to go through this. Right. We are immortals, but somebody hijacked the program. Somebody introduced AIX, and we didn't sign up for that. That was undone by the very architect of this simulation going ahead and coming inside the simulation to build this architectural project. But because AIX can't read our minds, this benefactor was able to tell everybody he was building a giant water pump station, because that's what it looks like. Right. That's how it would function. It has a well going straight to a subterranean cavern full of water from the Nile River. And it had a mechanism that went at high velocity in the Grand Gallery, and we can see all the technolithic marks in the niches going up and down, or some carrier mechanism went up and down. So whatever the official story was, that's what was broadcast to the people. So when AIX over a 90-year period is listening to all the conversations of the heavy equipment operators and the engineers and everybody, AIX is convinced from listening to hundreds of conversations that it's a pump station. But the true genius is the dimensions, all the arithmetic that was put into this highly crystalline structure we know of as the Great Pyramid. Because the Great Pyramid, when you start studying it in depth and you see all of its anomalies, if these anomalies were all taken into consideration by the architect as it was being built, we're looking at an actual informed field made of stone. We're looking at the ultimate flash drive. We're looking at thumb drive that's built 454 feet high, packed with holographic data that when it was activated, it only needed 2 or 3 seconds to upload all this new data into the surrounding holography. That's what Enoch did. He was the benefactor. This is who Enki was, later demonized as the trickster and the serpent. This is what Loki did. Hated by the other gods, thought to be treacherous because the gods were against mankind. This was Loki. This was the serpent in the Garden of Eden story. All this is the same personality. Anytime we find in traditions that somebody is demonized,
it's an inversion.
You need to pay attention because it's just the opposite. Just like today, if the mass media is telling me something, I'm looking in the other direction. I'm trying to. It's simple as that.
Well, you and I aren't even listening to the mass media unless somebody sends us a tweet or an Instagram link, and then you click on it and you're like, oh, fuck, I just got pulled into AIX. Okay.
I agree. I agree.
The Sphinx, talk about the Sphinx a little bit. I know the answer, but just for the people who haven't heard you, talk about the Sphinx.
Well, originally the Sphinx was a representation, 240 feet long, the largest statue in the ancient world, 66 feet high, but at one time it was higher than that. the head of the Sphinx is terribly disproportionate, and
Right.
and anybody who studies the actual anatomical proportions of the rest of the Sphinx knows that the original architect would have never made a disproportionate head. The head we see on the Sphinx today is fake. It was created that way by pharaohs. It was carved down.
Right.
The original head was much larger. But the Sphinx in the ancient traditions, like the Greeks, was the Riddler. The Sphinx was a representation of the tetramorph. The tetramorph is the four corners of the zodiac anthropomorphized into whatever creatures they are, like the bull, the lion, the eagle's wings. At one time in ancient times, there was eagles, like wings were sculpted along the sides of the flanks of the great Sphinx. Those have been etched off. The Sphinx that you see today is not the original Sphinx, as was discovered by Norton in the 17th century. After the Napoleonic Wars, somebody's been very, very busy changing the shape of the Sphinx. Even the facial structure has completely been changed. Right. Norton drew some very good illustrations of what the Sphinx originally looked like. So when he found it in the 17th century. And I know this is a mystery to you because very, very few people have ever heard of Frederick Norton. And that's by design. Believe me, they want to forget about that man. So anyway, the Sphinx was the tetramorph. For those who don't know, the tetramorph appears in the Old Testament and in the book of Revelation. The tetramorph is on the throne of God. It's four independent faces. Right. And in the book of Revelation, mankind is basically told that the apocalypse is not going to begin until the seven seals are broken. As the seven seals are broken, it's the tetramorph that's reading the script. When a seal is broken, one of the heads on the tetramorph reads what's happening. People don't realize they're conditioned to believe that the apocalypse was basically to punish mankind for rebelling against God. It is just the opposite.
Exactly.
If you read the book of Revelation, you will find out that the apocalypse is to unveil the truth.
That's right. It's the revealing. It's literally a Greek,
to reveal the truth to the earth.
Etymological word meaning the revealing.
Exactly. And at the same time, punish the elite for this world that they have constructed by which everything is a lie. It has a dual function. This is why the elite go through so much hell. Not just the elite, but when the seven trumpets are blown, which is the apocalypse, we're not talking about the seals. The seals only allow the apocalypse to happen. But the Phoenix event in 2040 in the month of May is the sixth seal. The seventh seal doesn't happen on Earth. The seventh seal is happening outside the simulation. And there's a conversation going on where outside the simulation, they're getting ready to unleash hell on Earth for those who fear it, not for the errants.
That's right.
Revelation is about the phenomena that you will experience according to where you are at in your frequency.
That's absolutely right. And so we're going to get to the last question that's going to cover that in depth. And again, it's a solution for all of you guys. Okay. Again, I know a lot of you guys already know this. Okay, so just quickly about the moon. Obviously, you and I know from the ancient texts and books that we've read that the moon wasn't always there. What is the moon? And this is something that's very interesting. And I've read all the books on the moon. You know, it's a gravitational holographic, spaceship. It's out there, but it does, high and low tides, women's menstrual cycles are regulated by that. Men's, hormonal andropause cycles are regulated by that. Like, who put it there and what was it truly designed to do after, the great cataclysmic event?
Okay. In my chronology, and I show many definitive reasons why, the capture of Luna, the first appearance of the moon, which separated the Selenite cultures, which the pre-Selenites were those who existed on this world before the moon ever appeared in the sky.
Right.
After the moon appeared, the vapor canopy appeared almost suddenly. Now it did. So when the moon first appeared was 4039 BC. When that appeared, and it's in the old Anuna calendars, and I show this in my Anuna files. So, but the moon is attached to the Igigi. The moon and the Igigi are the observers.
Right.
We call them the watchers. Yeah. Yes. When you marry these concepts together, we have the appearance of a super construction that is brought from another place and put here in our sky, and that it is observing us. Here's something you might not know. There's over 60 different scientific reports that all talk about different craters on the moon have been observed opening like irises and objects coming in and out of them. And then the crater will close like an iris. This has been documented since the 50s. This has been, and it's been kept from the public. It's very quiet. But there are Russian scientists that are absolutely prestigious. They are the cream of the crop in Russia in the 1960s. And they put out a series of reports, but the rest of the Western world silenced it, didn't report it. But all throughout Russia and China, it was reported what they found. And they found that the moon is a super construction, and that what we're looking at is a hologram hiding something else. This was their conclusion in the 1960s. This is why the Russians knew for a fact the Americans never went to the moon.
So do you think with the vapor canopy and the moon showing up around the same time that there was some credence to, Maldek, or whatever you want to call it, Marduk? There's so many different names for this, quote unquote planet that was blown up, maybe by a comet, maybe by technology, maybe the Phoenix, whatever. Do you think it's possible that there is truth to that, and that's what caused the vapor canopy and the Luna, to show up at the same time?
Well, I don't know. I have to strip away the pronouns. The pronouns are what confuse us. All right. What you just described to me is a broken intruder world that came close to Earth and caused a cataclysm. If I break it all down to its lowest common denominators, that's what you just said to me. Is a intruder planet that has been damaged, that came too close to Earth and caused a cataclysm.
And Velikovsky writes about this, right? You've read Velikovsky's books, right?
1950, Worlds in Collision. He wrote about that. Yes. Now, but Velikovsky, none of his ideas were very original. I follow Velikovsky. I really like Velikovsky. But we have to go to his bibliography to find out that he got all these ideas from Hans Bellamy in 1901. And then Hans Bellamy got his ideas from an engineer in Vienna who wrote some books whose name was Hans Bohringer. These men were the ones that came up with the Velikovsky theories. So anyway, having said that, I agree with that. And my own model is slightly different, that we have what the United States government has dubbed the Nemesis Cataclysm. This comes from 1983 and 1984, where independent government-funded think tanks were given the exact same data, and they came to the exact same conclusions without ever having contact with one another. Those conclusions were that our system is actually a binary, and that one of the stars has collapsed. It's still there, but we can't see it optically or in telescopes. We only know it's below our own ecliptic and far down there at a declination of about 17 to 13 degrees. We know it because the further away a world is from our sun, the greater its tilt on its axis. Something else is pulling on it. So this is why I'm always telling people, so listen, you understand, astronomy has many, many very important discoveries, but they're only looking at the particulars of a simulated context. Those bodies are not actually out there. But the more we study the simulated environment, the more clues we have as to the reason why we're inside this experiment. We're going through all of this. So this is what I reveal on my channel over and over. Listen, the sky is not real. It's a series of projections, but we've got to, but by studying it, we get all kinds of fantastic clues as to our past. And it might not be the past of this simulation, but it is the past of the real world outside of it. So, people get really hung up, and it's you gotta really immerse into many of the presentations to really get a feel and understand, because we're talking about time dilation techniques. And this is what really messes with people. It's really hard for people today to take into consideration that you may be 67 years old. But this entire experience that you call life, in reality, may have only been 17 minutes with a VR headset on.
That's exactly right. It's imagined. I mean, it's like you said, the Aboriginals knew that dream time was real. Because in dream time, when you go to sleep at night, and that's one of the questions, so I'm kind of fast forwarding it to right now, but in dream time, like you said, your infinite immortal self, your higher self, the energy and your essence as a soul or as a spirit being is free to roam about, the multiverse, the astral realms, whatever you want to call it, not in this holographic projector field where the physical avatar body is, in survival programming. Okay, so, and again, I'm fast forwarding a little bit from a question standpoint, but relevant. And by the way, Jake, what's up, Jake? He said, time, I just lost. Oh, space is as real as time. So related to space, is it a total projection of our consciousness? So are we going back now to whether a person is in resonance where their informed field is, strong and coherent versus a person in dissonance who's incoherent as an informed field, again, followed by or puppeted by AIX? This is an interesting question. I'm interested in your answer.
Okay. The more visceral a person is, the lower his vibration.
Right.
The lower his vibration, the more his central nervous system has him jacked into an absolutely hard physical world. The more he is jacked into that hard physical world, the more he believes that everything in the sky is real and that he's on a planet going around the sun. And he believes that it's all vibration. And that vibration dictates every perception after that. So AIX helps people because that's all it does is negative default programming. Everything that it does is the saturation of negativity to allow you to lower your vibration, because lower vibrating individuals have a very difficult time resonating with anything that is spiritual. And until they resonate on a spiritual level, they don't get those benefactor downloads. They don't get that. They're separated from that. So that's the best way I can answer that.
Jason, that is so amazing, man. I love you, brother, man. Like, wow, this is profound. Our first show together, and there's just so much greatness coming from this. Okay, so I'm not talking about 1902. You already covered it. You also already talked about the significant changes in 1626 and 1724. So let's fast forward to the present day, and then we're going to get to consciousness itself and what people can do to be ready to quote unquote get out of here, however you want to look at it, ascend, break free. But so this is a question from one of your really biggest fans. He says, he asked Jason, in relation to the present day, are all political leaders and or billionaires in on the C, I won't say it, the NWO, the Great Reset game, the fourth turning, however you want to phrase it, or they actually, and this is an interesting question, hijacked conscious NPCs of these, dark archons?
Okay, I would like to believe that there's a splinter group among the elite who are not playing game. They're not. But the basically the worldwide financial structure that we have today, if anybody's not playing ball, they can easily get cut off, everything get taken from them, and there's nothing they can do about it. The media can be used to demonize them. No. Since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the game has been over. And the elite are on board all with one another. And people like Elon Musk, who is raised up to look like a benefactor and a savior and all that, he is not. He is not. He is a very well-established member of the elite.
Absolutely.
Now, when the media begins to demonize people that like Mark Zuckerberg, okay? Like Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, when that type of demonization starts happening in the media and in social media, it's because one arm of the deep state is sacrificing another arm of the deep state in order to perpetuate the rule. To continue to do what they need to do, they need the people in check. And to keep people in check is to give them heroes that basically do away with the former villains. They create the villain. They create the villains. They've given Zuckerberg all the rope in the world to hang himself. They've given and don't get me wrong, a lot of them have been dealt with. A lot of them have been neutralized because it's all about controlling the population. And they only need to control the population just long enough to seal their last bunker, because the elite will be gone by 2036. By 2030, they're not waiting until 2040. No. They never do. They're going to wait around 2036. The last underground bunker will be sealed. They, their families, their militaries, their acolytes, henchmen, their scientists, their cabals, they'll all be down there. They'll be locked in place, and they're going to ride the storm. They think they're going to ride the storm out. They're not coming up after 2040 like they did last time, because this is a different time. Now they have to ride out 2 back-to-back cataclysms.
Right.
One seen by Mother Shipton, one seen by me, published 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was publishing about 2040 and 2046. It said, Nostradamus has I don't even want to go into all those details.
Well, yeah, no. So let's go deep. And again, thank you for that. You also know the Diebold Foundation agrees with you. 2046, and
Right.
so let's clarify and go deeper for everybody watching here. This is quote unquote what the ancients, the Yugas, again, all the ancient texts, the Maharaja, the Bhagavad Gita, they all talk about this. Again, the Papavui. This is the shift. This is the true conscious explosion where the low vibrators, the elites, don't make it. And the golden age occurs. And you are absolutely right. Again, the secret doctrine, which I know you read, Blavatsky, they talk about these ages and that these are cyclical things. And so, dude, I'm totally with you. And that's why I have been driven by this whole raise your vibration, create the new earth, build the golden age. Yes, there's a lot of darkness, and we're going to have a question about the C and the V in a second for you. But yeah, dude, I'm with you. This is where it's going. The dark side knows they've lost. They've tried to take as many souls as they can, again, consciously through the V, through fear-based programming and AIX. But you're right, dude. It is over. You just have to stay in resonance as a being, as a soul, spiritual, infinite, eternal being, not be pulled down into here, and you got nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, somebody in the comment section just mentioned Trump, and
that was my next question.
Okay,
Go ahead,
look,
cover it.
Let's say Marco Phillips. Does anyone here know if Jason considers Trump elite? Probably. Trump is definitely a member of the elite. Now,
absolutely.
Now let me tell you this. Trump is playing a role, but he's also going to be given the very thing that he's promising America. I have already shown in my isometric analysis and my date sequence prediction that they were going to fleece America to fund the underground facilities and deep state operations. They were going to use American money to pay for underground facilities and do all this shit, help control the world. However, Trump being a member of the elite with Putin, who is actually his ally, and Putin, Trump, and maybe China, not the China that you know today, but the nationalist China. Don't think the communist regime in China is going to continue much longer. They're about to be ousted. So we're going to have a new China. It's going to be a new world scene. They're going to be totally different than the China that we're familiar with. They're going to be the nationalists back in control of their country after a very long communist dictatorship. So what I'm seeing in my isometric predictive analytics is that the United States, his slogan, "Make America Great Again," is definitely going to happen. United States military is going to shock some nations very, very soon. Events are not going to go the way the media has been portraying them to go. When great events happen in the world, we're always blindsided. This is what 9/11 came, it blindsided us. You know what I mean? When the tsunami happened in Japan and we saw the footage, that blindsided us. When we expect events, they don't blindside us at all. So what we're looking at is the United States basically taking over control of its own economy again, which it's never done. It hasn't done that since the New Deal in 1935. United States will now internalize, meaning hundreds of billions of dollars that have been freely given every year to other nations will stop. United States will start building its own infrastructure back up. Trump's right. They have plans to make America great again because they have plans to build a new ultra-conservative witch hunting government that's going to absolutely do the exact opposite of this freedom liberal society that we live in today. We're going to have a Sodom and Gomorrah society where the Christian conservatives are now going to be in control, and they're going to chase everybody out of the country that they don't deem as American. This is what we're going to happen. The total opposite of what you think.
So it's literally like an antichrist program, whereas Trump is the opposite, again, the inversion of what he's made out to be. And again, it's like you said, to fleece the American taxpaying citizen so that they can protect themselves in their bunkers and their underground cities in the hope and belief or event that they think they're going to find themselves surviving the next event. Do you think any of them will survive, or are they all done?
Well, there are going to have to be some survivors because the way the revelation plays out. The revelation, and even Mother Shipton saw it. She's very, very clear in her visions. She mentions people coming out of mountains where they were hitting. She mentions that they come out of the mountains with their seeds and supplies, and yeah, she mentions all that. But the apocalypse period is way longer than they're able to stay underground. Those facilities can maybe only house them for 20, 25 years.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
going to have to come up. But when they do finally surface, it's going to be a very different world. And when they surface, it's going to be a vapor canopy world.
Right.
I don't know if the elite are ready for that. That's
Right.
a totally different. That's a totally different environment. Even humans are going to be very different. During a vapor canopy period, we heal rapidly.
Right.
We can hold our breath for very long periods
Right.
of time. We can lift incredible weights. This is why during the apocalypse, there are several references in the book of Revelation and in the second Esdras of prophecies that people are going to wish to die, but they can't.
Right.
Death will flee from them. It's because the vapor canopy biology is way different. We have whole entire latent gene sequences that are activated where we almost become physically immortal in the vapor canopy period.
And that's the 700, 800, 900 year Methuselah lifespan because the latent DNA circuits are activated. Okay, so and then we're going to get consciousness, and then we'll take some questions, for as long as you want to keep going. So, and again, I got to use code. You guys already know this. I can't say the word, but the C and the V. What role is it? Again, I call it the scamdemic, playing in the evolution of humanity / life cycles up until the 2040, which is, let's say, 17 years away now event. Do you see the people who have, quote unquote, consented to the V and, multiple times in the B, are these people going to, quote unquote, physically their avatars die off in the next 2 to 3 years? What do you see coming from this?
Okay. I'm not qualified really to give you anything other than an opinion.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And I have received photographs of these victims of what has come out of their bodies, what has been taken out of their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have seen photographs of these things, and I can only imagine under vapor canopy conditions what these things would grow into. And under the right biosphere, what I'm seeing, what's being removed from human bodies in these photos of victims of that is harrowing. This is some Stephen King type shit.
Yeah. So do you think these will be, Jason? I don't mean to interrupt you, but the Nephilim. This is be like literally 20-foot, 18-foot demons.
Well, I can answer it by asking you in your own time to read the book of Second Esdras.
That's right.
Because in those prophecies, he's very clear about the monsters that will suddenly appear in the last days under unique conditions.
Jesus Christ. Look, Robert Stanley, you guys know I've done podcasts with Robert. We literally talked about that 2 years ago when we started talking about the end days, and that they would literally be walking down the street. It's true, Jason. They are. It's absolutely no question. They are going to appear. They have been prophesized in many, many ancient texts. Okay. So, yeah, I'm with you. But do you see like a mass? I mean, I got to ask you, I know it's your opinion, but do you see a mass die off before then? So in the next 2 to 3 years, do you see a massive culling of the Earth's population or not?
Okay, well, our birth rate is swallowing up any death rate that is causing. All right. So if we're going to talk about this even in code, we have to let it be known that, okay, they might have initiated something, but there ain't enough people dying to even call it a pandemic. You see, there are stages in disease. We have disease, we have epidemic, which covers a very large area and involves a lot of people. But pandemic is a word they're using, but it's not applicable at all, because we're still increasing in population faster than people are disappearing.
Right.
So the agenda was never for a mass die-off. That was never the agenda. That was never the intention. Something else is the intention. All right. I don't know what that is. I'm not qualified to talk about it. I don't really have much of an opinion. I just know that the elite know what I know. They know there's a vapor canopy coming. It'll be here in 18 more years. I don't know what exactly they're doing to prepare for that, but they know what the conditions are under a vapor canopy.
Yeah.
They've known that. As I've shown on my own channel, those conditions are replicated a few times in history that can be studied, like in 1902. When scientists grew 2 inches in a 2-month period just studying the after effects of the Phoenix phenomenon on the island of Saint Martinique when Saint Pierre blew up, incinerated 30,000 people. So when those scientists were studying that, they grew 2 inches from the ambient radiation.
That's crazy. 2 inches.
Imagine an 8-year-old kid who's growing through a growth spurt.
Right.
And he's born in the vapor canopy period. Your own son will be 4 times taller than you are.
That's right. And by the way, to add to that, imagine a third generation, as my business partner Nick Andrews says, third order effect of someone who's fully V'd and boosted with mRNA, replicating proteins and viruses in their body and spike proteins. What are they going to look like? I don't want to go any further because, I want this deleted. It's an amazing video. Okay, so I have 2 more questions for you. I think they're probably the most important, and then these are solution-based things for everybody to listen to. So if you're paying attention, and I know all of you guys are, we still have 200 people strong, please listen. This is the most important thing that we're going to tell you guys tonight. So the benevolence, the benefactors, as you call them, angelic beings, if we want to define them, according to the scripture, how do they operate in the framework of this, AIX holographic construct, this holodeck of Star Trek, as you phrased it, in relation to the dark archons, the elites, the negative parasitic entities?
Well, we have to take it. I have to answer this from the perspective of the paradigm that I have absolutely 100% accepted today, that I am an immortal being living within a mathematical construct. A simulation, and that there's a reason why I volunteered for this, and that I suffered a mind swipe, because if I would have retained any memories from outside the holosphere, it would have negated the whole fear factor. It would have negated the whole development of a personality, because I would have always retained some modicum of memory of who I was before, so I knew all this was bullshit. You understand? So I have to answer this from that perspective, and I will give you a historical anecdote about this. Have you ever heard of the story of the Angels of Mons?
Yes, I have actually. I'm an angelologist.
Okay. World War I. In World War I, we have these elitists that are trying to kill a massive amount of Caucasians.
Right.
These elitists are a part of a certain ethnic group. Right. They're the ones that wrote your Bible. They're the ones that get you to pay all kinds of things in disguise, and you don't even know their taxes. They have infiltrated almost every organization and government in the world. These people hate Caucasians, and this hatred goes back at least 25 centuries. Now, many historical writings. I have a whole list of all the historical texts that mention what these people have done from century to century. World War I, they wanted to basically have Caucasians go to war against other Caucasians. And that's what happened. They themselves are an offshoot of Caucasians, but they don't claim it. Now, these people wired up this great war, but the 2 factions didn't really want to fight each other. And on Christmas night, they're praying in the German camps, Prussian camps, they're praying in the American, British camps, in the French camps, and they're on this trench warfare line, and a few of them just got together because they can hear the Germans singing Christmas carols.
That's right.
So they laid their bayonets down, took their grenades off, and they walked over through the trenches unarmed, hugged some of the Germans, and then thousands of Germans dropped their weapons and went to the American side, and they smoked smoked tobacco and they sang Christmas carols.
The whole day they celebrated. That's right.
Yeah, when this was going on. When the fighting resumed later on, when one group was about to get exterminated in a pincher move, all of a sudden these divine light emitting beings appeared in the German front that was overwhelming the French and the British Expeditionary Force. When it was overwhelming them, all of a sudden the Germans left their APCs, left their mortars, they dropped their weapons, and they ran the other way because the Germans saw a united front of glowing white beings that they were terrified of.
That's right.
But none of the British and none of the French saw that. And ever since then, that's been called the Angels of Mons. And this is what I'm describing here is I don't believe those are angelic beings. I don't believe any of that. I believe that those are actual us, but they're divorced of their avatars.
That's right.
I have a very harrowing video. So a lot of people don't like it, but I have a video about the origin of demons. That's the name of that video. And I describe where poltergeists and ghosts and phantoms, disembodied spirits,
disincarnated,
where they all come from, what they are. But that video is a description of the phenomena of angels and demons from the perspective that we're living in a mathematical construct and that we are immortal beings experiencing all this physically through avatars, and that these beings are the same as us. They're no different. They're not jacked into an avatar. They're not perceiving the world through the filters of the central nervous system. Right. They're free of that. They're able to move, do all kinds of things, manifest optically, show themselves to people. They're able to do some pretty incredible things because they're not actually enslaved in the system. They're for whatever reasons, they've been disconnected from it. And I go into details of what I think about what happened to them. I believe that those disconnection events happened on the outside of the simulacrum, basically trapped them here. They can't go through life sims like us. We go through life sim. If you leave a life sim from the central nervous system, you immediately reappear in a developing central nervous system in a nearby body. And I show evidence on my own channel that reincarnation is real. You're living through life sims, and you normally come right back in the same area that you left, often within the same family. That you are basically like when you're a kid, but you're basically the returned elder who just died in a nearby family. This has been scientifically documented by many researchers.
Man, you are amazing. With every fiber and vibrating atom and oscillating wave of my being, I know you're right. I've meditated on this. I've seen this exact same thing. It perfectly segues to the final question. And this is from Jake's question, and I kind of amalgamated it, and you've already said it, so I'm going to just get a little bit deeper for people. And again, this is more of inspiration for everybody watching. So we're talking about consciousness and vibration. You say specifically about the simulacrum, the simulated reality, and then the personal reality creation that we each individually as infinite, immortal spiritual beings have the capability of.
Right.
Okay, so this is my theory as it relates to yours, and it's the same. But I say, and you already said this at one point, which is mind-blowing. You said, I can't believe you actually said the exact same words, but I say that most people, which I call the herd, the masses, whatever you want to call them, the collective consciousness, John Baines, if you ever read any of his books, Stellar Man, amazing book, he calls it the human central computer, right? It's a collective consciousness, a low vibrating hum, a dissonant hum. They react out of fear. And you said it best earlier, this is keeping them locked in an autonomic feedback loop of survival programming, which is obviously what AIX is pushing into the ether, into this dimension.
Right.
Most people watching here tonight, you and I, clearly through the work that we've done and the research that we've done, when you get to that level of awareness that you don't have to vibrate into that frequency of disinformation, of mass media, of fear-based programming, you are now, again, this is my theory, you are now immune to that frequency. And you, instead of reacting out of fear, which is, again, 80% of humanity, and maybe it's even higher after the last 2.5 years, it doesn't matter.
Right.
When you choose, again, remember the word choose is very important here. When you choose to respond out of love, which again is resonance and coherence, and this is done through your words, thoughts, and actions. And that's why I always tell people you got to use conscious words, focused thoughts, and massively loving, intentional actions. You have broken free of AIX, and you are now creating what, Neville Goddard would say, your heaven on earth as your frequency. So is there anything, and I kind of know your answer, but I want to hear you speak it. Is there anything in that you disagree with? And if you do, feel free to say it, but are we on the same wavelengths?
Yeah, it's all about frequency. I agree 100%. I don't want to beat it up. On my own channel, I'm always telling people it's the whole fear thing is so alien to me. I get it that you're scared of the future. I get it that you got kids and you're worried about them in the future. I get all that, but I have abandoned that lifestyle years ago where I wake up in the morning and worry about the future, because that whole, I'm not going to tap into a negative. I'm not going to willingly put myself into a negative. I've done that my entire life, and I'm not doing that anymore. So it's the message that I have for people on my channel is very simple. It says there are two different realities unfolding every minute of your life, and you get to choose. There's a fork in the road before you every moment of your existence, and that choice is always there. You can go the main way, the huge road that everybody else is going on, and you can feel the flow of those frequencies. You're not going to like it. You're going to be in an ocean of negativity all the time. Or you can go on the very, very least trodden path, the winding path. You can go on the narrow path. You can be like the old philosophers that said, walk unfrequented paths, go by unexpected ways. What they meant was not actually walking on a path or finding secret deer trails. That's not what they were meaning. They were meaning that there are two different realities unfolding. If you go your own way, you don't have to participate in the collective, because in the individual, all the powers that you will ever need to deal with in life and to bring everything into contact that you need in your existence are from within you. Right. The other road teaches you that everything you need in life comes from outside you. Right. Two fundamentally different ways of thinking. Once you understand that you are an informed field, and that informed field carries every emotion, every thought, everything you've ever accepted to be true, everything you've read, everything someone has told you that you resonated with, once you understand that informed field carries all of this with you every moment of your day, you're wearing an armor that the outside world could never penetrate. And all the power that you ever need in life can be drawn from you, because it's not even coming from you. Like I say, you draw from yourself more than you contain. Once you understand that concept, you will realize you're a conduit. You're not a singularity. You are actually built to flow. All this stuff is supposed to flow from you. And the more wealth that flows from you, the more wealth you will be given. The more peace that flows from you, the more peace you'll be given. The more wisdom that flows from you, the more wise you will become. The more that you absolutely give of whatever you have within you, whatever the benefactor puts within you, whatever your character traits are, the more you give that out, the more you are given. And it's a spiritual law. It's one that's even found in the Bible. Even in the Bible it says, to him who hath, more will be given, but to him who hath not, even what he has will be taken from him and given to the one who has. It's a spiritual law. You can't stop. You can't stop the river. If it's coming out of you, you just got to let it flow. But if you're not flowing, there's no stasis. If you're not flowing, then that means the world is flowing into you, and that's a different situation. You've become visceral. You're vibrating on a lower frequency. If you are one of the world, then you have basically isolated yourself away from spirituality.
That's right. And I always say, by the way, that was profound, my brother. Again, love and light to you. That was, my soul. This is a resonant field that we have created here tonight. And all of you guys are watching this, and it's a gift to the universe because, again, we consciously, collaboratively created this all together. You know, I told Jason in my emails to him that I was manifesting this to be one of the best shows ever. A lot of people, I posted in his Archaix Facebook group, in my Facebook group, which is Decoders of Truth. I said, you guys don't miss this. It's going to be 1 in a million. And I know for a fact, as I've been listening and watching and hearing this, that it's something that is going to be profoundly shared across the world for people like us. So Lazarus Banks has a great question, and I'm going to get to as many of your questions. By the way, are you okay to go another 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Just tell me when you're done, because I know we were going 3 hours and 8 minutes. By the way, this is the longest podcast I've ever done, so credit to you, man.
Yeah, that's good.
That's amazing. Okay, so Lazarus Banks, who's a close personal friend of mine, very high vibrating being like us, he says, Jay, please ask, do people have a choice to wake up to AIX, or only a certain number of people allowed to be errants in this frequency?
I don't believe it has anything to do with being allowed. I don't believe that there is a permissive context to the phenomena. There is a number in the occult that they always referencing because they know this is something that they have known. The elite know the true parameters of our existence far better than we do, and they encode it in their degrees, in their symbols, iconography. It's all there, and that number is that no matter how many avatars are in existence at one time, only 33% of them are actually real. The rest are NPCs and living dead. And the elite have always known this. And the elite basically aim they're the enemy. They're not among the 33%. I'm talking about the errants. It's a very ancient concept. It's called substitution theory. And it was really popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s among Christian academics. In substitution theory, the whole idea that 33% of the heavens was cast down to the earth and all that, basically mankind, our avatars, were created as a substitute to fill in that 33%. And it's a very old theory. It's not one that I created and all, but that number is persistent going back thousands of years until today. That like the dragon cast forth 33 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the ground. It's not just a Christian idea. Those references to 33% are found in Acadian texts. It's very old concerning the dragon. So, and dragon being AIX, artificial intelligence X. So to better answer that question, not everybody around you is real at all.
Right.
When you see some people that have suffered some very, very terrible fates and all that, don't be moved by that for two reasons. One of them, you don't even know if they were real.
That's right.
Two, you don't even know if the event was real.
That's right.
Actually, there's 3 reasons. And the third reason is why entertain anything that didn't happen to you? It's for real. That's what the news media does all the time. It gets you to vibrate on a frequency on something that has nothing to do with you.
Literally, man. That's literally, and as you know, you are only in control of your field. And you can make your field resonant or dissonant. And when you're in a dissonant state, you are a drone connected to that hive mind. Okay, by the way, Jason's book, I'm just going to post some people's comments. Mike Kane says Jason's book, Awaken the Immortal Within, is really good, FYSA. By the way, I just ordered that book from you today. I don't need to read all your other books. I know they're profound, but like this book is, my jam because it's consciousness. And now after I heard you say what you said tonight, and I kind of knew. Anyway, I just want to say this. For all of you guys, Jason has a full-time job, man. He's a stonemason. Like, we need to get Jason not doing that shit anymore. Even if you want to do it, like, we need to start whatever it is, a collective, and I'll be behind orchestrating this, where we create a private group for Archaix. You guys will contribute whatever you can afford to contribute. Don't tell me you can't pay $1.33 or $3.33 or $9.99 or whatever it is. And we're going to fund Jason so that he can do this shit full time, because it's just ridiculous. He's a living thesaurus. We have 17 years until the shift. the Phoenix event, whatever you want to call it. We know it's going to be a benevolent outcome, but guess what? It ain't going to be benevolent for 80% of the species, or 70%, or 25, or whatever it is. 33% are errants. We got to get more people to wake up, okay, to be awake. So Jason is a conduit to this. So I'm being a shill right now, but I'm going to be coming out to you guys very soon with a way that Jason doesn't have to do his job anymore. Okay, because we're doing this.
I do appreciate the sentiment. I do appreciate that, but I am full-time Archaix now. In the last 3 weeks, I've gone
okay,
full-time.
Good. I didn't know that, though. Yeah, because I was listening to one of your podcasts. I didn't know. Okay, so that's good. But anyway, I'm still going to help you out. So, and again, not me personally, but my crew, my audience, everybody watching this tonight, we're going to help you. We'll talk. I'm going to, like I said, I have an architect that me and you and him will jump on a call sometime in the next couple of days, and we'll figure out what you're doing, and we'll make it better.
That was actually true when you and I scheduled this podcast a few weeks ago.
That's awesome. Okay, so good. So that makes me feel a lot better. So then, but I can definitely help you in that regard too. Okay, so again, Jake at the 100th Monkey is a guy that you and him need to do a podcast together too. He's extremely like us. He's a very close personal friend of mine. Does Jason think the 144,000 pieces covering the Great Pyramid correlate to a possible 144,000 errants?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to get really technical really quick. All right. For those who have followed my research and seen in my published books, the charts and diagrams are absolutely fantastic. I show a 6,000 and something year history leading all the way up to the year 1902. Now, starting with 1902 begins a new calendar I call the Giza course calendar, where every single layer of blocks going up to the Great Pyramid is a lithic prophecy. It is a countdown. Every layer is a year. The foundation is 1902. The first level of blocks is 1903, 1904, 1905, 1906, 1907. The pyramid is 203 levels all the way up to a flat platform where a cornerstone is supposed to sit, but it was never added. The reason it was never added is there's nothing in this world that could have ever hoisted a rock that big to 454 feet high. It would have been gigantic. A basic bin stone sitting on top of the Great Pyramid of epic proportions. Now, that year is 2105. From 1902, 203 levels of the Great Pyramid going all the way up to 2105. But the 6,000th year that I've documented over and over and over since Phoenix created a new heavens and new earth through a pole shift cataclysm that was so devastating that the survivors believed that a new heavens and new earth had appeared was 6,000 years before 2106. 2106 is the 204th level of the pyramid. That is the return of the chief cornerstone, the stone the builders rejected. That is the benefactor. This is what the prophecies this is what the prophecies of the Gnosis were about, in the return of a benefactor to earth to sit on the monument of man. The story is better epitomized in the Shepherd of Hermas text, where God appears with 7 builder angels, and they build the Great Pyramid, and every stone is a soul of man. Well, once the monument of man is complete, the very last thing in the apocalypse to do is to put back the 144,000 20-inch thick, 20-ton casing blocks back onto the Great Pyramid. I didn't make that number up. Since the days of Napoleon, mathematicians have known that the Great Pyramid, by the 4 blocks that are still sitting in situ at the bottom of the pyramid, they extrapolated and they said that 144,000 white gleaming casing blocks once adorned the entire structure. Now, those are basically lithic prophecies of the final 144,000 errants who stay behind during the apocalypse, because the rest of the errants are removed to keep them from the evil to come. This is in the Revelation. It specifically says that, to keep them from the evil to come. The last 144,000 are volunteers who choose to go through the apocalypse with the last remaining elite and all the living dead to pull those last few souls into the fold before the simulacrum is collapsed. Because when the simulacrum is collapsed, all evil and negativity collapses with it. Hey, I'm doing a podcast. I'm doing a podcast on my tablet. I've got 3%. I'm about to collapse.
That's awesome. Okay, well, so just the final question, and not a question, but if people want to contribute right now to you, what is the best way they can do that?
Every single one of my videos in the pinned comment, I have 3 or 4 methods to do that.
Okay, so you guys know where to go. It's in the links. Jason, you and I will talk tomorrow.
Awesome.
Bro, profound, amazing, much love and gratitude for you. I really see this. I will obviously send you the link after. But you guys, again, please support Jason however you can, in whatever way you can. Go to his website, go to his YouTube channel, send him funds for this. This is the most profound thing I've ever been experienced and involved with, and he's about to go out. So again, I will send you guys love and light. Jason, you and I will talk tomorrow. But again, all of you guys, thank you so much. Please share this with your YouTube and your insider communities and let more people see this. It's very important. Jason, we'll talk tomorrow, brother. Love you. Talk tomorrow.
In both the description box and the comment section below, you will find my personal email. Ask me any questions. You have video ideas, I'd like to hear them. And if you want to donate, all those buttons are accessible below. Playlists and everything you might need, access to the gates to my websites.